Hey guys, how's it going? This is Kevin Ehsani, and this is special debate night coverage of the Progressive Experience. Thank you so much for tuning in, if you are. We're going to be doing some preview, a little bit of a pre-debate preview here. And then obviously we're going to do the 2-hour debate coverage, and then we'll do like a post-game roundup kind of thing. So just to let you guys know, if you guys are not aware, the people that are going to be on the stage today will be Marianne Williamson, Tim Ryan, Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Beto O'Rourke, John Hickenlooper, John Delaney, and Steve Bullock. And then the guys for the next debate, tomorrow night's debate, will be Michael Bennet, Christian Gillibrand, Julian Castro, Cory Booker, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Jay Inslee, and Bill de Blasio. So it's good to see that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren are going to be on the first. They're going to be on the first debate tonight, so that should be entertaining. I just wanted to let you guys know to please check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/Prague Blacksmith. If you could become a patron and give me a generous contribution, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, remember, if you want to get more information on this show, on this podcast, check out hashtag the Prague Square on Twitter. That will direct you to all of my live broadcasts on Periscope, as well as every segment I post on YouTube. So, before they get started here, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of my input on what's going to happen. I believe that Bernie Sanders will have a good debate night tonight, because I think after kind of what happened in the first debate, where Kamala Harris kind of stole his shine a little bit going after Joe Biden, I still think Bernie did a decent job. I just think he wasn't able to capture the spotlight as much as somebody like Kamala Harris did when she was going after Biden really hard when it came to kind of the whole issue of like segregation and everything, and the segregation. Busing, the kind of school busing and stuff, and then kind of lumping that in with segregation and stuff, so like that whole debate was, her kind of showing her moment where she was able to get attention. And, a lot of people, I think a lot of Democratic loyalists already knew who she was. So it wasn't a matter of anybody not knowing who Kamala was, but it was more or less her, kind of getting out there and getting people to recognize her. The person that actually came out to be more recognized than anybody, although I don't know if it got her kind of necessarily in the mainstream, was Tulsi Gabbard, because Tulsi Gabbard got a lot of people searching for her through Google, which was really interesting. And so like the Google searches came out like crazy, trying to figure out who is this Tulsi Gabbard person, and that definitely got her a lot of attention. So that's that was obviously good for her, but still Kamala, and Kamala's in the next debate. She's going to be in tomorrow night's debate. She's going to be in there with Biden and the rest of them. So I think Gillibrand as well. So Elizabeth Warren, it's basically tonight's going to be Warren against Bernie. I think Bernie, when he was debating Hillary in the 2016 debates, and which were taking place in 2015 and then 2016, but when the debates first started, he kind of started off a little bit slow, and he didn't come out guns blazing very early. It took him a minute to kind of like acclimate himself, and considering since this was the first time that he was involved in like a really big time debate, in the mainstream, it took him a minute, and that's fine. It's not how you start, it's how you end. And Bernie was able to not end, but he was able to kind of progress much better as the debates went on, and that was really important for his status, becoming such a big time politician now that he is candidate that now he is, and becoming recognized. And that was really, really important for himself. And he kind of shook off the cobwebs in the beginning in those debates against Hillary and a couple of other candidates that were there, but it was mainly him and Hillary. And I think he's going to be able to shine and show his true Bernie Sanders progressiveness, putting it out there and getting people to really recognize him for who he is. with all the other candidates that are like all the other candidates that might make a name for themselves, I definitely think it will be Warren. I think Warren and Bernie, although I don't want this to happen, but I think Warren and Bernie are going to try to kind of complement each other more instead of facing off against each other. I think at this point of the debates and this part of the pre-primary process is going to involve her and Bernie trying to get along and not trying to go after one another, because they are friends and they're able to get along. When it comes to doing legislation together and agreeing on a lot of the same things. But don't get it twisted. Bernie is much more to the left, much more to the left than Elizabeth Warren is. She's become much more friendly to corporate interests. She's become much more friendly to the Democratic Party, and it's a lot of times it's just about. It's about trying to get in with those corporate interests, and I don't like that. And I know a lot of progressives don't like that, and they're definitely catching up to the likelihood that Warren might be becoming much more neoliberal and centrist. So you guys should definitely keep a kind of a notice on that. And I know progressives are already doing that, but those of you who are maybe a little bit on the fence between Bernie and Warren should definitely know that Warren is much more in the Dem loyalist camp than Bernie is, and Bernie is much more, he likes to kind of ride with the beat of his own drum, and that's perfectly fine. I think that's obviously the establishment hates that. Beto O'Rourke, we'll see what happens to him. Beto is not somebody that did very well in the last debate. He's somebody that needs to definitely make a name for himself if he wants to stay in this race. Pete Buttigieg, he's getting a lot of support from celebrity donors and big donors and stuff, so he's going to definitely be like somebody that's going to try and stand out, but I don't know. I don't really see him having much of a ceiling and going much higher than he already is, because he's pretty boring and milquetoast as it is. But we'll see what happens. I don't know. But I think these might be the last legs that Beto O'Rourke is going to be able to stand on, because there was so much hype behind him. It seems like they're going to get started here, so let's listen in.
Democratic presidential debate. The stage is set. The candidates are waiting in the wings.
And this audience is eager to hear what they have to say. Right now, the road to the White House drives through Detroit. The Democrats are in Michigan for a premier two-night event, a defining moment that will determine who gets left behind and who takes on President Trump.
This is our chance.
There is no middle ground. Don't let anybody tell you that freedom is a conservative value. It is an American value.
Tonight, a fight for the heart of the party. Senator Bernie Sanders determined to seize his second chance at the nomination.
It is a question of getting our priorities right.
Going head-to-head with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Longtime friends fighting for the same cause and the same voters.
We should dream big, fight hard, and win.
The progressives at center stage defending their ideals against a crowd of more moderate challengers. Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
Buttigieg. Buttigieg. I don't think I've ever heard it pronounced like that before.
Look to translate
Buttigieg.
national support.
I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States of America.
4 candidates will put their heartland values on display. Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Let's get to work and win this election.
Klobuchar's unbearable.
Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper.
Hickenlooper is even worse.
Congressman Tim Ryan.
It's time.
Tim Ryan, yeah, I don't know. He's so bland.
Montana Governor Steve Bullock.
Steve Bullock. Who the fuck is Steve Bullock?
Debate.
We're here to make
He's a nobody.
Trump
This dude was claiming that Bernie Sanders was like scared of him or some shit, or people, not him, but his supporters were claiming that.
Outsider Marianne Williamson.
Mary Williamson.
This time, we will win with love.
We will win love with
The
love.
stage is set for the biggest presidential field in history to campaign for change in a state they want to take back from Trump.
There is no such thing as a permanently red state. This democracy must come together. We must repair it. There is nothing that will stop us.
Democracy is not for sale. Good evening from the historic Fox Theater in downtown Detroit, Michigan. This is the CNN Democratic presidential debate. Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world watching us on CNN, CNN International, CNN en Espanol, CNN.com, and listening on SiriusXM and the Westwood One radio network. And a special welcome to the U.S. military members, diplomatic corps, and their families serving overseas and watching on the American Forces Network. I'm Jake Tapper, anchor of The Lead and State of the Union, along with CNN's chief political correspondent, Dana Bash, and Don Lemon, anchor of CNN Tonight.
We are looking forward to moderating one of the largest gatherings of Democratic presidential candidates in back-to-back debates. 20 candidates were divided in two groups by random draw earlier this month. The second group of 10 will appear on the stage at this time tomorrow night. The first 10 will make their entrance right now.
So please welcome from Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Go Bernie.
From Massachusetts, Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Sounds like she got a bigger pop. All shaking hands and shit.
South Bend, Indiana, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. From Texas, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke. From Minnesota, Senator Amy Klobuchar.
They're also friendly with each other.
From Colorado, former Governor John Hickenlooper.
The breakfast cereal guy, as Kyle Kalinske puts it. Mr. Breakfast Cereal, Hickenlooper.
From Ohio, Congressman Tim Ryan.
Tim Ryan got fucking demolished by Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard in the what was it, the first debate, right? Or was it the second debate? One of those debates, whatever, when they took on each other. Yeah, it was the second debate. Delaney, what a fucking clown. Can't stand this motherfucker. He's such a typical neo-lib centrist.
From Texas,
Ugh. He's even worse. I would say he's even right-wing. Marilyn Williamson, the love is going to defeat all lady. She's just corny, but, you know, she's not that bad. She's harmless.
From Montana, Governor Steve Bullock.
Mr. Irrelevant, Steve Bullock. This is like the last dude that's chosen in, like, the NFL draft. Mr. Irrelevant. The guy that, like, nobody gives a fuck about and he comes out last, too. Because nobody's going to even give a shit about him.
Of the United States.
There's my one. There's my couple. One of my few sports analogies right there. For those of you guys that watch sports.
Now please rise for the presentation of colors from the James Europe VFW Post 2233 and the District 4 Honor Guard. And please remain standing for our national anthem performed by Detroit's own Pastor Marvin
National
Lyons
anthem?
and the Perfecting Church Choir.
I think Bernie should be kneeling for this national anthem. Come on, let's get it going already. The fuck?
The stage is set.
Finally.
We'll begin right after this short break.
Oh, we still need a fucking commercial now. Alright, I guess, whatever. Give me a little bit more time to analyze. Okay, anyway, so I guess I could get a little bit more analyzing in here. Yeah, Steve Bullock was somebody that I think barely just made it in based on whatever donors or you know, being in the polls. Not so much the polls, but more for donors and like amount of money and shit he raised. That's why it's such a fucking, it's such fucking bullshit that Mike Gravel couldn't make it, because Mike Gravel, he managed to actually reach that. He reached that that threshold of the number of donors or however much he raised and stuff, and they still didn't let him in on the debate. It was fucking bullshit. What the hell? You're gonna let this asshole Steve Bullock from some like random ass state, Montana, middle of the fucking country. You're gonna let that dude come in, but you're not gonna let Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel was in the debates in 2008. I've seen clips of him on YouTube, and I remember watching clips back in the day. But there's clips of him on YouTube back from 2008 challenging the likes of Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, I think even Obama to some extent. So, I mean, he was really good back then. So, yeah, I don't know why they're letting this guy get any attention. Obviously, he's, you know, getting some money from like a couple of like rich donors to get him over the top. Whereas Mike Gravel, gets money from small donors just like Bernie does. And they can't even let him on. They don't want, because that's the thing. They don't want this guy who's like a firebrand. You know, he's an older dude. He's actually, I think, older than Bernie too. And he's like an older dude. He kind of shoots from the hip and stuff. He says things that's going to piss off the, Dem loyalists and all the other candidates out there. I mean, I'm sure Bernie would prefer having him there too. But I mean, yeah, the rest of them, like they wouldn't be able to stand somebody like this. So it's just very fitting, as usual, for the Democratic Party to be trying to silence and censor these candidates that truly are, progressive. Obviously, they, did that with Bernie in 2016. They could not shut Bernie up in 2016, and they're not going to have much better success shutting him up here either. So, and like I said, my prediction is that I think Bernie is going to do well, because he's going to know that he has to make a name for himself to the people that keep saying that he's done. He's not doing good in polls. Look how good Kamala is doing. Look how good Elizabeth Warren is doing. But if that involves going after Elizabeth Warren, I don't think so. Here we go.
Welcome back to the CNN Democratic presidential debate. Candidates, we're about to to begin opening statements, but first a review of the ground rules that your campaigns agreed to earlier this month to ensure a fair debate. As moderators, we will attempt to guide the discussion. You will each receive 1 minute to answer questions, 30 seconds for responses and rebuttals, and 15 additional seconds if a moderator asks for a clarification. The timing lights will remind you of these limits. Please respect that, and please refrain from interrupting your fellow candidates during their allotted time. A candidate infringing on another candidate's time will have his or her time reduced. We also want to ask our audience inside the historic Fox Theater to remain silent when the candidates are actively debating. The candidates need to be able to hear the questions and hear one another.
Time now for opening statements. You'll each receive 1 minute. Governor Steve Bullock, please begin.
Thanks, Dana. I come from a state.
Steve Bullock. Oh, come on.
Let's not kid ourselves. He will be hard to beat. Yet watching that last debate, folks seem more concerned about scoring points or outdoing each other with wish list economics than making sure Americans know we hear their voices and will help their lives. Look, I'm a pro-choice, pro-union, populist Democrat that won 3 elections in a red state. Not by compromising our values, but by getting stuff done. That's how we win back the places we lost. Showing up, listening, focusing on the challenges of everyday Americans. That farmer getting hit right now by Trump's trade wars, that teacher working a second job just to afford her insulin. They can't wait for revolution. Their problems are in the here and now. I'm a progressive.
No, you're not, bro. You're not progressive.
And I'm running for president to get stuff
Stop
done
calling
for
yourself
all those
progressive.
Americans Washington has left behind.
Marianne Williamson.
Thank you. In 1776, our founders brought forth on this planet an extraordinary new possibility. It was the idea that people, no matter who they were, would simply have the possibility of thriving. We have not ever totally actualized this ideal, but at the times when we have done best, we have tried. And when forces have opposed them, generations of Americans have risen up and pushed back against those forces. We did that with abolition, and with women's suffrage, and with civil rights. And now it is time for a generation of Americans to rise up again. For an amoral economic system has turned short-term profits for huge multinational corporations into a false god. And this new false god takes precedence over the safety and the health and the well-being of we, the American people, and the people of the world, and the planet on which we live. Conventional politics will not solve this problem, because conventional politics is part of the problem. We, the American people, must rise up and do what we do best and create a new possibility. Say no to what we don't want, and yes to what we know can be true. I'm Marianne Williamson, and that's why I'm running for president.
Congressman John Delaney.
Folks, we have a choice. We can go down the road that Senator Sanders and Senator Warren want to take us, with bad policies like Medicare for all, free everything.
This guy doesn't give a fuck, man.
It'll turn off
As in the sense he doesn't give a fuck about
re-elected. That's what
popular
happened with
policies,
Governor.
obviously.
That's what happened with Mondale. That's what happened with Dukakis.
What a clown. How are you running as a Democrat?
The idea is to create universal health care for every American with choice. Someone who wants to unify our country and grow the economy and create jobs everywhere. And then we win the White House. I'm the product of the American dream. I believe in it. I'm the grandson of immigrants, the son of a construction worker. My wife April and I have 4 amazing daughters. I was the youngest CEO in the history of the New York Stock Exchange, created thousands of jobs, and then served in Congress. That's the type of background, and my platform is about real solutions, not impossible promises that can beat Trump and govern. Thank you.
Congressman Tim Ryan.
America is great, but not everyone can access America's greatness. The systems that were built to lift us up are now suffocating the American people. The economic system that used to create $30, $40, $50 an hour jobs, that you can have a good, solid middle-class living, now force us to have 2 or 3 jobs just to get by. Most families, when they go to sit at the kitchen table to do their bills, they get a pit in the middle of their stomach. We deserve better. And the political system is broken too, because the entire conversation is about left or right. Where are you at on the political system? And I'm here to say this isn't about left or right. This is about new and better. And it's not about reforming old systems. It's about building new systems. And tonight I will offer solutions that are bold, that are realistic, and that are a clean break from the past.
Governor John Hickenlooper.
Last year, Democrats flipped 40 Republican seats in the House, and not one of those 40 Democrats supported the policies of our frontrunners at center stage. Now, I share their progressive values, but I'm a little more pragmatic. I was out of work for 2 whole years until I started what became the largest brew pub in America. And I learned the small business lessons of how to provide service and teamwork, and became a top mayor, and as governor of Colorado, created the #1 economy in the country. We also expanded healthcare and reproductive rights. We attacked climate change head on. We beat the NRA. We did not build massive government expansions. Now, some will promise a bill tonight or a plan for tonight. What we focused on was making sure that we got people together to get things done, to provide solutions to problems, to make sure that we worked together and created jobs. That's how we're going to beat Donald Trump. That's how we're going to win Michigan and the country.
Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Let's get real. Tonight we debate, but ultimately we have to beat Donald Trump. My background, it's a little different than his. I stand before you today as a granddaughter of an iron ore miner, as a daughter of a union teacher and a newspaper man, as a first woman elected to the U.S. Senate from the state of Minnesota, and a candidate for president of the United States. That's because we come from a country of shared dreams. And I have had it with the racist attacks. I have had it with a president that says one thing on TV that has your back, and then you get home and you see those charges for prescription drugs and cable and college. You're going to hear a lot of promises up here, but I'm going to tell you this. Yes, I have bold ideas, but they are grounded in reality. And yes, I will make some simple promises. I can win this. I'm from the Midwest, and I have won every race, every place, every time. And I will govern with integrity, the integrity worthy of the extraordinary people of this nation.
Congressman Beto O'Rourke.
I'm running for president because I believe that America discovers its greatness at its moments of greatest need. This moment will define us forever. And I believe that in this test, America will be redeemed. In the face of cruelty and fear from a lawless president, we will choose to be the nation that stands up for the human rights of everyone, for the rule of law for everyone, and a democracy that serves everyone. Whatever our differences, we know that before we are anything else, we are Americans first. And we will ensure that each one of us is well enough and educated enough and paid enough to realize our full potential. We will meet these challenges here at home, and we will lead the world in those that we face abroad, successfully confronting endless war and climate change. At this moment of truth, let us pursue our national promise and make a more perfect union of everyone, by everyone, and for everyone.
Pete Buttigieg.
That was horrible.
I'm running for president because our country is running out of time. It is even bigger than the emergency of the Trump presidency. Ask yourself how somebody like Donald Trump ever gets within cheating distance of the Oval Office in the first place. It doesn't happen unless America is already in a crisis. An economy that's not working for everyone. Endless war, climate change. We have lived this in my industrial Midwestern hometown. My generation has lived this as long as we have been alive, and it's only accelerating. Science tells us we have 12 years before we reach the horizon of catastrophe when it comes to our climate. By 2030, the average house in this country will cost $500,000, and a woman's right to choose may not even exist. We're not going to be able to meet this moment by recycling the same arguments, policies, and politicians that have dominated Washington for as long as I have been alive. We've got to summon the courage to walk away from the past and do something different. This is our shot. That is why I'm running for president.
Senator Elizabeth Warren.
Donald Trump disgraces the office of president every single day. And anyone on this stage tonight or tomorrow night would be a far better president. I promise no matter who our candidate is, I will work my heart out to beat Donald Trump and to elect a Democratic Congress. But our problems didn't start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is part of a corrupt, rigged system that has helped the wealthy and the well-connected and kicked dirt in the faces of everyone else. We're not going to solve the urgent problems that we face with small ideas and spinelessness. We're going to solve them by being the Democratic Party of big structural change. We need to be the party that fights for our democracy and our economy to work for everyone. You know, I know what's broken in this country. I know how to fix it, and I will fight to make it happen.
Senator Bernie Sanders.
Finally.
Tonight in America, as we speak, 87 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. But the healthcare industry made $100 billion in profits last year. Tonight, as we speak, right now, 500,000 Americans are sleeping out on the street. And yet companies like Amazon that made billions in profits did not pay one nickel in federal income tax. Tonight, half of the American people are living paycheck to paycheck. And yet 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Tonight, the fossil fuel industry continues to receive hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies and tax breaks while they destroy this planet. We have got to take on Trump's racism, his sexism, xenophobia, and come together in an unprecedented grassroots movement to not only defeat Trump, but to transform our economy and our government.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Let's start the debate with the number one issue for Democratic voters, health care. And Senator Sanders, let's start with you. You support Medicare for all, which would eventually take private health insurance away from more than 150 million Americans in exchange for government-sponsored health care for everyone. Congressman Delaney just referred to it as bad policy, and previously he has called the idea political suicide that will just get President Trump reelected. What do you say to Congressman Delaney?
Please say something.
You're wrong.
Dead wrong. Dead fucking wrong.
Right now, we have a dysfunctional healthcare system, 87 million uninsured or underinsured, $500,000 Americans every year going bankrupt because of medical bills, 30,000 people dying while the healthcare industry makes tens of billions of dollars in profit. 5 minutes away from here, John, is a country. It's called Canada. They guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child as a human right. They spend half of what we spend. And by the way, when you end up in a hospital in Canada, you come out with no bill at all. Health care is a human right, not a privilege. I believe that. I will fight for that.
Amen.
Senator Sanders, Congressman Delaney.
Well, I'm right about this. We can create a universal healthcare system to give everyone basic healthcare for free, and I have a proposal to do it. But we don't have to go around and be the party of subtraction and telling half the country who has private health insurance that their health insurance is illegal. My dad, the union electrician, loved the health care he got from the IBEW. He would never want someone to take that away. Half of Medicare beneficiaries now...
Joe Biden's made the same argument.
...private insurance or supplemental plans. It's also been...
The unions love their insurance.
Many hospitals will close, and it's bad policy.
Senator Sanders, I want to...
We're
going to come to you in 1 second, but let me go to Senator Sanders right now. Senator Sanders?
The fact of the matter is, tens of millions of people lose their health insurance every single year when they change jobs, when their employer changes that insurance. If you want stability in the healthcare system, if you want a system which gives you freedom of choice with regard to doctor or hospital, which is a system which will not bankrupt you, The answer is to get rid of the profiteering of the drug companies and the insurance companies. Move to Medicare for all.
But now he's talking about a different issue. What I'm talking about is really simple. We should deal with the tragedy of the uninsured and give everyone health care as a right. But why do we got to be the party of taking something away from people?
No one is the party.
That's what they're running on. They're running on telling half the country that your health insurance is illegal. It says it right in the bill.
All right, thank
we
you.
don't have to do that. We can give everyone health care and allow people to have choice. That's the American way.
Look,
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Warren.
So look, let's be clear about this. We are the Democrats. We are not about trying to take away health care from anyone. That's what the Republicans are trying to do. And we should stop using Republican talking points in order to talk with each other about how to best provide that health care. Now, I want to have a chance to tell the story about my friend, Addie Barkin. Addie is 35 years old. He has a wife, Rachel. He has a cute little boy named Carl. He also has ALS, and it's killing him. Addie has health insurance, good health insurance, and it's not nearly enough.
I'm coming right. I'm staying.
Addie Barkin's also a supporter of Bernie, too.
You exceeded your time, and so let me just stay with you on Medicare for all.
All right.
At the last debate, you said you're, quote, with Bernie on Medicare for all. Now, Senator Sanders has said that people in the middle class will pay more in taxes to help pay for Medicare for all, though that will be offset by the elimination of insurance premiums and other costs. Are you also, quote, with Bernie on Medicare for all when it comes to raising taxes on middle class Americans to pay for it?
Giant corporations and billionaires are going to pay more. Middle class families are going to pay less out of pocket for their health care. And I'd like to finish talking about Addie, the guy who has ALS. This isn't funny. This is somebody who has health insurance and is dying. And every month, he has about $9,000 in medical bills that his insurance company won't cover. His wife, Rachel, is on the phone for hours and hours and hours begging the insurance company, please cover what the doctors say he needs. He talks about what it's like to go online with thousands of other people to beg friends, family, and strangers for money so he can cover his medical expenses. The basic profit model of an insurance company is taking as much money as you can in premiums and pay out as little as possible in health care coverage. That is not working for Americans across this country.
Thank you, Senator.
Medicare for all will fix that, and that's why I'll fight for it.
Thank you, Senator. Just a point of clarification in 15 extra seconds. Would you raise taxes on the middle class to pay for Medicare for all, offset obviously by the elimination of insurance premiums? Yes or no?
Costs will go up for billionaires and go up for corporations. For middle class families, total costs will go down.
Governor Bullock, I want to bring you in. You do not support Medicare for all. How do you respond to Senator Warren?
No, health care is so personal to all of us. Never forget
Sandra Bullock.
12-year-old son had a heart attack within 24 hours.
Kyle Klinsky referred to Steve Bullock as Sandra Bullock.
Because we had good insurance, he's here with me tonight. At the end of the day, I'm not going to support any plan that rips away quality health care from individuals. This is an example of wish list economics. It used to be just Republicans
wish list
repeal and
economics.
replace. Now many Democrats do as well. We can get there with a public option, negotiating drug prices, ending.
Thank you, Governor Bullock. I want to bring in Mayor Buttigieg on the topic of whether or not the middle class should pay higher taxes in exchange for guaranteed health care and the elimination of insurance premiums. How do you respond, Mayor?
So we don't have to stand up here speculating about whether the public option will be better than, or a Medicare for all environment will be better than the corporate options. We can put it to the test. That's the concept of my Medicare for all who want it proposal. That way, if people like me are right, that the public alternative is going to be not only more comprehensive, but more affordable than any of the corporate options around there. We'll see Americans walk away from the corporate options into that Medicare option, and it will become Medicare for all without us having to kick anybody off our
Just 15 seconds on the clarification. You are willing to raise taxes on middle-class Americans in order to have universal coverage with the disappearance of insurance premiums, yes or no?
I think you can buy into it. That's the idea of Medicare for all who want it. Look, this is a distinction without a difference, whether you're paying the same money in the form of taxes or premiums. Look, in this country, if you have health coverage, if you don't have health coverage, you're paying too much for care. And if you do have health coverage, you're paying too much for care.
I want to bring in Congressman O'Rourke on the topic of whether the middle class should pay higher taxes in exchange for universal coverage and the elimination of insurance premiums. What's your response?
The answer is no. The middle class will not pay more in taxes in order to ensure that every American is...
Yeah, because you support Medicare for America or whatever the fuck it
A
is.
false choice. Some who want to improve the Affordable Care Act at the margins, others who want a Medicare for all program that will force people off of private insurance. I have a better path. Medicare for America. Everyone who's uninsured is enrolled in Medicare tomorrow. Those who are insufficiently insured are enrolled in Medicare.
Just to 15 seconds.
And those who have employer-sponsored insurance.
Jake, this is important. Who's offering a false choice here?
You have some. Governor Bullock, who said that we will improve the Affordable Care Act at the margins with a public option. You have others to my right who are talking about taking away people's choice for the private insurance they have or members of unions. I was listening to D. Taylor in Nevada. His members want the health
said you're offering a false choice, sir.
Congressman, not at all. You know, it took us decades, false starts, to get the Affordable Care Act. So let's actually build on it. A public option.
That's what the fucking Medicare for All does, you morons.
You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any place actually in the world. We got nothing to show for it. Negotiate prescription drug prices. Enterprise medical billing. That's the way that we can get there without disrupting the lives of 160 million people that like their employer-sponsored health insurance.
Congressman O'Rourke, every estimate that I've seen of expanding ACA, even through a public option, still leaves millions of people uninsured and also means that people are not guaranteed the health care that they need. As the example that Senator Warren showed us, our plan ensures that everyone is enrolled in Medicare or can keep their employer-sponsored insurance. When we listen to the American people, and this is what they want us to do, they want everyone covered, but they want to be able to maintain choice, and our plan does that.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to bring in Senator Klobuchar. Senator Warren, at the beginning of the night, said that Democrats cannot win the White House with small ideas and spinelessness. In the last debate, she said, the politicians who are not supporting Medicare for all simply lack the will to fight for it. You do not support Medicare for all. Is Senator Warren correct? Do you just not lack the will to fight for it?
That is incorrect. I just have a better way to do this. And in one of my first debates, Jake, I was called a street fighter from the Iron Range by my opponent. And when she said it, I said, thank you. So this is what I think we need to get done. We need the public option. That's what Barack Obama wanted, and it would bring...
I don't give a fuck what Barack Obama wanted. He's not president anymore.
And by the way, I just don't buy this. I've heard some of these candidates say that it's somehow not moral if you... not moral to not have that public option. Well, Senator Sanders was actually on a public option bill last year, and that was Bernie, the Medicaid public option bill that Senator Schatz introduced. Clearly, this is the easiest way to move forward quickly, and I want to get things done. People can't wait. I've got my friend Nicole out there whose son was actually died trying to ration his insulin as a restaurant manager, and he died because he didn't have enough money to pay for it.
What is she talking about? Bernie supported a public option?
I need to go to Senator Sanders, then Senator Warren, because we both mentioned
the author of the Medicare bill, let me clear up one thing. As people talk about having insurance, there are millions of people who have insurance, they can't go to the doctor, and when they come out of the hospital, they go bankrupt. All right? What I am talking about, and others up here are talking about, is no deductibles and no co-payments. And Jake, your question is a Republican talking point. At the end of the day,
there you go. There you go.
And by the way,
let him know, Bernie. Let him know.
The healthcare industry will be advertising tonight on this program.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Warren, it's your turn.
Oh, can I complete that, please?
Your time is up.
They will
30
be
seconds.
advertising tonight with that talking point.
Senator Warren.
So we have to think of this in terms of the big frame. What's the problem in Washington? It works great for the wealthy. It works great for those who can hire armies of lobbyists and lawyers. And it keeps working great for the insurance companies and the drug companies. What it's going to take is real courage to fight back against them. These insurance companies do not have a God-given right to make $23 billion in profits and suck it out of our healthcare system. They do not have a God-given right to put forms in place.
It says that it will take everyone off of their insurance.
Thank you, Senator. If we could all just stick to the rules of the time, that would be great.
So I'm the only one on the stage who actually has experience in the healthcare business, and with all due respect,
Nobody gives a fuck, man.
Understand the business. We have the public option, which is great. The public option is great, but it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go far enough.
Bernie needs to call out this motherfucking more. He already is, but keep doing it. Keep going. Somebody embarrass this clown, please.
Medicare is fully paid for without raising middle-class tax options. So when we think about this debate, there's Medicare for all, which is extreme.
I want to bring in Governor Hickenlooper. Governor Hickenlooper, I'd like to hear what you have to say about Senator Warren's suggestion that those people on the stage who are not in favor of Medicare for all lack the political will to fight for it.
Well, obviously I disagree with that as much as I respect both of the senators to my right. I think it comes down to that question of Americans being used to being able to make choices, to have the right to make a decision. And I think proposing a public option that allows some form of Medicare, that maybe is a combination of Medicare Advantage and Medicare, but people choose it, and if enough people choose it, it expands, the quality improves, the cost comes down, more people choose it. Eventually, in 15 years, you could get there, but it would be an evolution, not a revolution.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Warren.
We have tried this experiment with the insurance companies. And what they've done is they've sucked billions of dollars out of our healthcare system. And they force people to have to fight to try to get the healthcare coverage that their doctors and nurses say that they need. Why does every doctor, why does every hospital have to fill out so many complicated forms? It's because it gives insurance companies a chance to say no and to push that cost back on the patients.
Thank you, Senator Warren. I want to bring in Marianne Williamson. Ms. Williamson, how do you respond to the criticism from Senator Warren that you're not willing to fight for Medicare for all?
Trying to start fights over here.
Senator Warren said that about me specifically. I admire very much what Senator Warren has said and what Bernie has said. But I have to say, I'm normally way over there with Bernie and Elizabeth on this one. I hear the others, and I have some concern about that as well. And I do have concern about what the Republicans would say, and that's not just a Republican talking point. I do have concern that it will be difficult. I have concern that it will make it harder to win, and I have concern that it will make it harder to govern. Because if that's our big fight, then the Republicans will so shut us down on everything else.
Mayor Buttigieg,
it is time to stop worrying about what the Republicans will say. Look, if it's true that if we embrace
Pete Buttigieg actually makes some sense.
They're going to say we're a bunch of crazy socialists. If we embrace a conservative agenda, you know what they're going to do? They're going to say we're a bunch of crazy socialists. So let's just stand up for the right policy, go out there and defend it. That's the policy I'm putting forward, not because I think it's the right triangulation between Republicans here and Democrats there, because I think it's the right answer for people like my mother-in-law, who is here, whose life was saved by the ACA, but who is still far too vulnerable to the fact that the insurance industry does not care about
Senator Sanders, your response?
Let's be clear what this debate is about. Nobody can defend the dysfunctionality of the current system. What we are taking on is the fact that over the last 20 years, the drug companies and the insurance companies have spent $4.5 billion of your health insurance money on lobbying and campaign contributions. That is why, when I went to Canada the other day, people paid 1/10 the price in Canada for insulin that they're paying in the United States.
I want to bring in Congressman Tim Ryan. Congressman Ryan, your response?
So here we are in Detroit, home of the United Auto Workers. We have all our union friends here tonight. This plan that's being offered by Senator Warren and Senator Sanders will tell those union members who gave away wages in order to get good health care that they're going to lose their health care because Washington's going to come in and tell them they got a better plan. This is the left and right thing. New and better is this. Move Medicare down to 50. Allow people to buy in. Kaiser Permanente said that if those 60 million people do that, they will see a 40% reduction in their health care costs. Let businesses buy in, Jake.
So, Senator, let's talk about that. If Medicare for All is enacted, there are more than 600,000 union members here in Michigan who would be forced to give up their private health care plans. Now, I understand that it would provide universal coverage, but can you guarantee those union members that the benefits under Medicare for All will be as good as the benefits that their representatives, their union reps, fought hard to negotiate?
Well, two things. They will be better because Medicare for All is comprehensive. It covers all health care needs. For senior citizens, it will finally include dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses.
But you don't know.
Second of all,
You don't know that,
Second
Bernie.
of all,
We'll come to you in a second,
I do know.
Congressman.
I wrote the damn bill.
Oh, Bernie getting angry.
Second of all, many of our union brothers and sisters, nobody more pro-union than me up here, are now paying high deductibles and co-payments. And when we do Medicare for All, instead of having the company putting money into healthcare, they can get decent wage increases, which they're not getting today.
I want to bring in Congressman Ryan to respond to what Senator Sanders has said.
Senator Sanders does not know all of the union contracts in the United States. I'm trying to explain that these union members are losing their jobs. Their wages have been stagnant. The world is crumbling around them. The only thing they have is possibly really good health care. And the Democratic message is going to be, we're going to go in, and the only thing you have left, we're going to take it, and we're going to do better. I do not think that's a recipe for success.
What a straw man, man. The hell are you talking about?
Congressman Delaney. So the bill that Senator Sanders drafted, by definition, will lower quality in healthcare because it says specifically that the rates will be the same as current Medicare rates. And the data is clear. Medicare does not cover the cost of healthcare. It covers 80% of the cost of healthcare in this country. And private insurance covers 120%. So if you start underpaying all the healthcare providers, you're going to create
I can't stand Tim Ryan and John Delaney right now.
buy their healthcare with cash, and the people who are forced, like my dad, the union electrician, will have that healthcare plan taken away from him.
Thank you,
They
Congressman.
will be forced
I want
into
to
an
give Senator
underfunded
Sanders.
system.
I want to give Senator Sanders a chance to respond.
Under Medicare for All, the hospitals will save substantial sums of money because they're not going to be spending a fortune doing billing and the other bureaucratic things that they have to do today.
I've done
Second
the
of
math,
all,
Governor, head up.
maybe you did that and made money off of healthcare, but I would
Yeah.
run a not.
He made money off of health. Yeah, exactly. He works for a fucking healthcare. He founded a fucking healthcare company.
$500 billion a year by ending all of the incredible complexities that are driving every American crazy trying to deal with the health insurance company.
Thank you, Senator.
Hospitals will be better
Congressman
off
Delaney,
than
I
they are
want to let you
today.
have a chance to respond.
Listen, his math is wrong. That's all I'm saying. That his math is wrong. It's been well documented that if all the bills were paid at Medicare rate, which is specifically, I think it's in section 1200 of their bill, then many hospitals in this country would close. I've been going around rural America, and I ask rural hospital administrators one question. If all your bills were paid at the Medicare rate last year, what would happen? And they all look at me and say, we would close. But the question is, why do we have to be so extreme? Why can't we just give everyone health care as a right and allow them to have choice? I'm starting to think this is not about health care. This is an anti-private sector strategy.
We're going to move on to the issue of immigration now. There is widespread agreement on this stage on the need for immigration reform, a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, including dreamers. But there are some areas of disagreement. Mayor Buttigieg, you're in favor of getting rid of the law that makes it a crime to come across the U.S. border illegally. Why won't that just encourage more illegal immigration?
When I'm president, illegally crossing the border will still be illegal. We can argue over the finer points of which parts of this ought to be handled by civil law and which parts ought to be handled by criminal law, but we've got a crisis on our hands. And it's not just a crisis of immigration, it's a crisis of cruelty and incompetence that has created a humanitarian disaster on our southern border. It is a stain on the United States of America. Americans want comprehensive immigration reform. And frankly, we've been talking about the same framework for my entire adult lifetime. Protections for dreamers, making sure that we have a pathway to citizenship for the undocumented, cleaning up lawful immigration. We know what to do. We know that border security can be part of that package, and we can still be a nation of laws. The problem is we haven't had the will to get it done in Washington. And now we have a president who could fix it in a month, because there is that bipartisan agreement. But he needs it to be a crisis rather than an achievement. That will end on my watch.
Just point of clarification, you did raise your hand in the last debate. You do want to decriminalize crossing the border illegally.
So in my view, if fraud is involved, then that's suitable for the criminal statute. If not, then it should be handled under civil law. But these show of hands are exactly what is wrong
with the way that this race
Well, we're not doing that here.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Congressman O'Rourke, you live near the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso. You disagree with Mayor Buttigieg on decriminalizing legal border crossings. Please respond.
I do, because in my administration, after we have waived citizenship fees for green card holders, more than 9 million of our fellow Americans, freed dreamers from any fear of deportation, and stopped criminally prosecuting families and children for seeking asylum and refuge, end for-profit detention in this country, and then assist those countries in Central America so that no family ever has to make that 2,000-mile journey, then I expect that people who come here follow our laws, and we reserve the right to criminally prosecute them if they do not.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Warren, you say the provision making illegal border crossings a crime is totally unnecessary. Please respond.
So the problem is that right now, the criminalization statute is what gives Donald Trump the ability to take children away from their parents. It's what gives him the ability to lock up people at our borders. We need to continue to have border security, and we can do that. But what we can't do is not live our values. I've been down to the border. I have seen the mothers. I have seen the cages of babies. We must be a country that every day lives our values, and that means we cannot make it a crime when someone
Thank you,
comes
Senator.
here.
Just to clarify, would you decriminalize illegal border crossings?
The point is not about criminalization. That has given Donald Trump the tool to break families apart.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Hickenlooper, your response.
No, I agree that we need secure borders. There's no question about that. The frustration with what's going on in Washington is they're kicking the ball back and forth. Secure the borders. Make sure whatever law we have doesn't allow children to be snatched from their parents and put in cages. How hard can that be? We've got, I don't know, on the 2 debate nights, we've got 170 years of Washington experience. Somehow it seems like that should be fairly fixable.
Well, and one way to fix it is to decriminalize. That's the whole point. What we're looking for here is a way to take away the tool that Donald Trump has used to break up families.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Senator Klobuchar, your response.
I would say there is the will to change this in Congress. What's missing is the right person in the White House. I believe that immigrants don't diminish America, they are America. And if you want to do something about border security, you first of all change the rules so people can seek asylum in those northern triangle countries. Then you pass the bill, and what the bill will do is it'll greatly reduce the deficit and give us some money for border security and for border help processing the cases. And most of all, it will allow for a path to citizenship, because this is not just about the border. Donald Trump wants to use these people as political pawns.
Thank you, Senator
when we have
Klobuchar.
people all over our country that simply want to work and obey the law.
Senator Sanders, you want to provide undocumented immigrants free health care and free college. Why won't this drive even more people to come to the U.S. illegally?
This will have a strong border protections. But the main point I want to make is that what Trump is doing through his racism and his xenophobia is demonizing a group of people. And as president, I will end that demonization. If a mother and a child walk thousands of miles on a dangerous path, in my view, they are not criminals. They are people fleeing violence. And I think the main thing that we've got to do, among many others, Beto made this point, we've got to ask ourselves, why are people walking 2,000 miles to a strange country where they don't know the language? So what we will do the first week we are in the White House is bring the entire hemisphere together to talk about how we rebuild Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador so people do not have to flee their own countries.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Bullock, about 2/3 of Democratic voters and many of your rivals here for the nomination support giving health insurance to undocumented immigrants. You haven't gone that far. Why not?
Look, I think this is a part of the discussion that shows how often these debates are detached from people's lives. We got 100,000 people showing up at the border right now. If we decriminalize entry, if we get health care to everyone, we'll have multiples of that. Don't take my word. That was President Obama's Homeland Security Secretary that said that. The biggest problem right now that we have with immigration, it's Donald Trump. He's using immigration to not only rip apart families, but rip apart this country. we can actually get to the point where we have both safe borders, where we have a path to citizenship, where we have opportunities for dreamers. And you don't have to decriminalize everything. What you have to do is have a president in there with the judgment and the decency to treat someone that comes to the border like one of our own.
You know, I just
Senator,
want to add on this.
he just said your plan is unrealistic. How do you respond?
You know, I think that what we have to do is we have to be an America that is clear about what we want to do with immigration. We need to expand legal immigration. We need to create a path for citizenship, not just for dreamers, but for grandmas and for people who have been working here in the farms and for students who have overstayed their visas. We need to fix the crisis at the border. And a big part of how we do that is we do not play into Donald Trump's hands. But he wants to stir up the crisis at the border because that's his overall message. If there's anything wrong in your life,
thank you,
blame
Senator Warren.
them.
Governor Bullock, your response.
But you are playing into Donald Trump's hands. The challenge isn't that it's a criminal offense to cross the border. The challenge is that Donald Trump is president and using this to rip families apart. A sane immigration system needs a sane leader, and we can do that without decriminalizing providing health care without decriminalizing providing health care for everyone. And it's not me saying that. That's Obama's Homeland Security Secretary that said you'll cause further problems at the border, not making it better.
Look, what you're saying is ignore the law. Laws matter. And it matters if we say our law is that we will lock people up who come here seeking refuge, who come here seeking asylum. That is not a crime. And as Americans, what we need to do is have a sane system that keeps us safe at the border, but does not criminalize the activity of a mother fleeing here.
Thank you. Congressman Ryan, are Senator Sanders' proposals going to incentivize undocumented immigrants to come into this country illegally?
Yes. And right now, if you want to come into the country, you should at least ring the doorbell. We have asylum laws. I saw the kids up in Grand Rapids, not far from here. It is shameful what's happening, but Donald Trump is doing it. And even if you decriminalize, which we should not do, you still have statutory authority. The president can still use his authority to separate families. So we've got to get rid of Donald Trump. But you don't decriminalize people just walking into the United States. If they're seeking asylum, of course we want to welcome them. We're a strong enough country to be able to welcome them. And as far as the health care goes, undocumented people can buy health care too. I mean, everyone else in America is paying for their health care. I don't think it's a stretch for us to ask undocumented people in the country to also pay for health care.
Senator Sanders, your response.
Well, two things. A sane immigration policy moves to comprehensive immigration reform. It moves to a humane border policy in which, by the way, we have enough administrative judges so that we don't have incredible backlogs that we have right now. But to answer your question, I happen to believe that when I talk about health care as a human right, that applies to all people in this country. And under a Medicare for all single-payer system, we could afford to do that.
Senator Sanders, thank you. Ms. Williamson, your response.
Everything that we're talking about here tonight is what's wrong with American politics. And the Democratic Party needs to understand that we should be the party that talks not just about symptoms, but also about causes. When we talk about health care, we need to talk about more than just the health care plan. We need to realize we have a sickness care rather than a health care system. We need to be the party talking about why so many of our chemical policies and our food policies and our agricultural policies and our environmental policies and even our economic policies are leading to people getting sick to begin with.
Thank you.
That's what the Democratic, but I want to say more about
Ms. Williamson.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms.
come back
Williamson.
to me this time.
Go ahead. Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Let's turn now to the issue of gun violence. There were 3 large-scale shootings this past weekend in America. At a park in Brooklyn, on the streets of Philadelphia, and one that left 3 dead and 12 injured at a food festival in Gilroy, California.
Yeah.
Mayor Buttigieg, other than offering words of comfort, what are you specifically going to do to stop this epidemic of gun violence?
Well, this epidemic of gun violence has hit my community too, far too many times. It's the worst part of being mayor. Getting the phone call, consoling grieving parents. And we have a mass shootings worth of killings every day in this country. what we're doing hasn't worked because we haven't had a system in Washington capable of delivering what the American people have told us they want. 90% of Republicans want universal background checks, not to mention the common sense solutions like red flag laws that disarm domestic abusers and flag mental health risks, and an end to assault weapons, things like what I carried overseas in uniform that have no business in American neighborhoods in peacetime, let alone anywhere near a school. I was at an event a few days ago, and a 13-year-old asked me what we were going to do about school safety, and then began shaking, and then began crying. And we could talk about these policies, but we already know the policies. The only thing I could think of looking into the eyes of this child is, we're supposed to be dealing with this so you don't have to. High school is hard enough without having to worry about whether you're going to get shot. And when 90% of Americans want something to happen, and Washington can't deliver, we can't expect.
Thank you, Mayor. Governor Hickenlooper, your response, please.
I disagree with his
Please stand by,
diagnosis
Senator.
of the problem.
Please stick to the rules.
Okay.
We'll get to you. We'll come to you in just a minute. Governor Hickenlooper, please respond.
Well, this is the fundamental nonsense of government. Another place where, despite our best efforts, we can't seem to make any progress. You know, when I went to the movie theater in Aurora in 2012 and saw that footage of what happened at that crime scene, I'll never forget it. And we decided, you know, that we were going to go out and take on the NRA, and we passed, as a purple state, we passed universal background checks. We limited magazine capacity. We did the basic work that, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be able to get done in Washington.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Klobuchar, please respond.
This isn't just about a system, or it's not just about words. This is about the NRA. I sat across from the President of the United States after Parkland because I've been a leader on these issues and have the bill to close the boyfriend loophole. And I watched and wrote down when 9 times he said he wanted universal background.
Boyfriend loophole.
The next day he goes and he meets with the NRA and he folds. As your president, I will not fold. I will make sure that we get universal background checks passed, the assault weapon ban, that we do something about magazines, and that we understand when that little 6-year-old boy died, Stephen Romero, when his dad said he's only 6 years old, all I can say is he's 6 years old. We have to remember that.
This is the exact same conversation we've been having since I was in high school. I was a junior when the Columbine shooting happened. I was part of the first generation that saw routine school shootings. We have now produced the second school shooting generation in this country. We dare not allow there to be a third. Something is broken, if it is even possible, for the same debate around the same solutions that we all know are the right thing to do. They won't prevent every incident, they won't save every life, but we know what to do, and it has not happened.
Thank you, Mayor. Senator Klobuchar, please respond.
Yes. What is broken is a political system that allows the NRA and other large, big money to come in and make things not happen when the majority of people are for it. The people are with us now. After Parkland, those students just didn't march. They talked to their dads and their grandpas and the Hunters and their family, and they said there must be a better way. Then we elected people in the House of Representatives, and guess what? It changed, and they passed universal background checks. And now that bill is sitting on Mitch McConnell's doorstep because of the money and the power of the NRA. As president, I will take them on.
Thank you, Senator.
This is not about systems and words.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Governor Bullock, how can Democrats trust you to be the leader on this fight for gun safety when you only changed your position to call for an assault weapons ban last summer?
Ooh.
Like 40% of American households, I'm a gun owner, I hunt. Like far too many people in America, I've been personally impacted by gun violence. Had an 11-year-old nephew, Jeremy, shot and killed on a playground. We need to start looking at this as a public health issue, not a political issue. I agree with Senator Klobuchar. It is the NRA. And it's not just gun violence. It's when we talk about climate, when we talk about prescription drug costs. Washington, D.C. is captured by dark money, the Koch brothers and others. That's been the fight of my career. Kicking the Koch brothers out of Montana, taking the first case after Citizens United up to the Supreme Court, making it so that elections are about people. That's the way we're actually going to make a change on this, Don, is by changing that system. And most of the things that folks are talking about on this stage, we're not going to address until we get dark money and the post-Citizens United corporate spending out of these elections.
Congressman O'Rourke, your response.
How else can we explain that we lose nearly 40,000 people in this country to gun violence, a number that no other country comes even close to, that we know what all the solutions are and yet nothing has changed, is because in this country, money buys influence, access, and increasingly outcomes. The Centers for Disease Control prevented from actually studying the issue in the first place. As president, we will make sure that we ban political action committee contributions to any member of Congress or any candidate for federal office. We will listen to people, not PACs, people, not corporations, people, not special interests.
Congressman, thank you very much. Senator Sanders, you said this in 2013, just months after the Sandy Hook massacre, and I quote here, "If you pass the strongest gun control legislation tomorrow, I don't think it will have a profound effect on the tragedies we have seen." Do you still agree with that statement today?
I think we have got to do, I think what I meant is what President Obama said, and that nobody up here is going to tell you that we have a magical solution to the crisis. Now, I come from one of the most rural states in America. I have a D- voting record from the NRA, and as president, I suspect it will be an F record. What I believe we have got to do is have the guts to finally take on the NRA. You asked me about my record. Back in 1988, coming from a state that had no gun control, I called for the ban of the sale and distribution of assault weapons. I lost that election. I will do everything I can, not only to take on the NRA, but to expand and create universal background checks, do away with the straw man provision, do away with the gun show loophole, and do away with the loopholes that now exist for gun manufacturers who are selling large amounts of weapons into communities that are going to gangs.
Yeah. Mayor Buttigieg, your response?
Still the conversation that we've been having for the last 20 years. Of course we need to get money out of politics. But when I propose the actual structural democratic reforms that might make a difference, end the Electoral College, amend the Constitution if necessary to clear up Citizens United, have D.C. actually be a state, and depoliticize the Supreme Court with structural reform, people look at me funny, as if this country were incapable of structural reform. Does anybody really think we're going to overtake Citizens United without constitutional action? This is a country that once changed its constitution so you couldn't drink, and then change it back because we changed our minds about that. And you're telling me we can't reform our democracy in our time?
Thank you, Mayor.
We have to, or we'll be having the same argument 20 years from now.
Please respond, Governor Fuller.
You can make changes. Even in Montana, with a 2/3 Republican legislature, we passed a law that said, if you're going to spend money in our elections, I don't care if you call yourself Americans for America, you're going to have to disclose every one of those dollars in the last 90 days. I'll never forget running for re-election in 2016. Even we stopped the Koch brothers from spending at that time. If we could kick the Koch brothers out of Montana, we could do it in D.C., we could do it everywhere. And we're also taking steps, additional steps that we've taken. I passed an executive order. If you're even in a contract with the state,
Governor Bullock, thank you very much. Ms. Williamson, how do you respond to this issue of gun safety?
The issue of gun safety, of course, is that the NRA has us in a chokehold. But so do the pharmaceutical companies, so do the health insurance companies, so do the fossil fuel companies, and so do the defense contractors. And none of this will change until we either pass a constitutional amendment or pass legislation that establishes public funding for federal campaigns. But for politicians, including my fellow candidates, who themselves have taken tens of thousands and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars from these same corporate donors, to think that they now have the moral authority to say, we're going to take them on, I don't think the Democratic Party should be surprised that so many Americans believe yada, yada, yada. It is time for us to start over with people who have not taken donations from any of these corporations and can say with real moral authority, that is over. We are going to establish public funding for federal campaigns. That's what we need to stand up to. We need to have a constitutional amendment. We need to have legislation to do it. Until we do it, it's just the same old, same old.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. The debate will be right back, right after this short break.
Okay, so there's a lot to go over there regarding this. What issues did they cover? They covered Medicare for all. They did not get into climate change yet, which is very, very surprising and very disappointing, considering, which gives you an idea of, the kind of political landscape we're in when we're talking about all these other issues that honestly are not as important to the destruction of the earth. No offense to people that may agree, but I mean, that's just the truth. But when it comes to, the conversation of, I would say, immigration reform, it seems like a lot of them, like based on the things that they say, it just seems like, yeah, they pretty much agree on the same stuff. It's nothing really like, oh, like you're saying something that's totally, and totally like out of bounds or anything. But, I think a lot of it has to do with like how they frame the conversation. Whereas conversations pertaining to things like Medicare for all, for example, they just completely disagree. They can't come to any kind of agreement when it comes to, how to truly, ensure the American people on kind of like grounds of health insurance and, whatever, what kind of insurance it is, or whether it's insurance at all, so that kind of stuff is, it's definitely, you can tell it's existing, its existence is not gonna, it's not gonna go away. These, Democrats they're constantly gonna be shills, a lot of these establishment Democrats, they're constantly gonna be shills for the insurance industry to one extent or another, while while a lot of them honestly are just kind of, they're just like, oh, well, I totally have the better plan, and I'm my legislation is gonna cover and insure, or whatever however you want to frame it, cover and give people more health care. Like that's what John Delaney keeps fucking saying. That guy's embarrassing himself one time after another. He keeps thinking he's nailing the point. The guy is an utter clown, and he's taking on Bernie Sanders and not even laying a glove on him. Bernie Sanders is just like dodging every punch and just landing a counter blow on every, a counter punch on every single punch that he tries to throw at him. So Delaney is just way out of his league. He's getting fucking roasted like crazy on Twitter too, and deservedly so, because he's just an idiot. But when it comes to a lot of the other candidates, I think they're just, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, honestly, let's just put it this way. Aside from Hickenlooper, Delaney, what is it? Hickenlooper, Delaney, I guess Klobuchar. No, I'm sorry, Ryan. Like the rest of them are just putting out plans that are like, yeah, well, I'm totally in favor of the public option. Whereas those three that I just mentioned, Hickenlooper, Delaney, and Tim Ryan, are just, it seems like they're putting out ideas that are just like honestly right-wing ideas, like conservative Republican ideas. So it's like they're not even putting out ideas that are like they're not even trying to pretend that they support Medicare for all, Whereas like the likes of Elizabeth Warren, Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, they're like, yeah, no, I totally support Medicare for all, or Medicare for America, which is, by the way, a plan that was put forth by CAP, which is Center for American Progress. So yeah, here we're back again.
Democratic voters say that they want a candidate who can beat President Trump more than they want a candidate who agrees with them on major issues. Governor Hickenlooper, you ran a Facebook ad that warned, quote, socialism is not the answer. The ad also said, quote, don't let extremes give Trump 4 more years. Are you saying that Senator Sanders is too extreme to beat President Trump?
I'm saying the policies of this notion that you're going to take private insurance away from 180 million Americans, who many of them don't want to give it, many of them do want to get rid of it, but some don't, many don't. Or you're going to, the Green New Deal, make sure that every American's guaranteed a government job if they want. That is a disaster at the ballot box. You might as well.
Thanks for making my point.
To Donald Trump. I think we got to
spouting Republican talking points.
Trump is failing. The word malpractice, and this is interesting. I always thought it was doctors or lawyers. It's negligent, improper, illegal professional activity for doctors, lawyers, or public officials. Google it. Check it out. Donald Trump is malpractice personified. We've got to point that out. Why is it soybean farmers in Iowa need 10 good years to get back to where they were 2 years ago? Where's the small manufacturing jobs that are supposed to come back? Why are we lurching from one international crisis to another? All things that he promised American voters. We've got to focus on that and the economy and jobs and training so that we can promise a future for America that everybody wants to invest in.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Sanders, you are a proud Democratic socialist. How do you respond to Governor Hickenlooper?
Well, the truth is that every credible poll that I have seen has me beating Donald Trump, including the battleground states of Michigan, where I won the Democratic primary, Wisconsin, where I won the Democratic primary, and Pennsylvania. And the reason we are going to defeat Trump and beat him badly is that he is a fraud and a phony, and we're going to expose him for what he is. The American people want to have a minimum wage, which is a living wage, $15 an hour. I've helped lead that effort. The American people want to pay reasonable prices for prescription drugs, not the highest price in the world. I've helped lead the effort.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Hickenlooper, I want to bring you back to respond.
So, again, I think if we're going to force Americans to make these radical changes, they're not going to go along. You throw your hands up, but you haven't. I can do it. But you haven't implemented the plans. Us governors and mayors are the ones that we have to pick up all the pieces. When suddenly the government's supposed to take over all these responsibilities, and there's no preparation. The details aren't working. You can't just spring a plan on the world and expect it to succeed.
Senator Sanders.
John, I was a mayor, and I helped transform my city.
Yeah, exactly.
Experience. Second of all, interestingly enough, today is the anniversary of Medicare. 54 years ago, under Lyndon Johnson and the Democratic Congress, they started a new program. After 1 year, 19 million elderly people in it. Please don't tell me that in a 4-year period, we cannot go from 65 down to 55 to 45 to 35. This is not radical. This is what virtually every other country on earth does. We are.
Thank you, Senator. I want to bring in Congressman Ryan. You're from the state of Ohio. It's a state that voted twice for Obama and then went to President Trump in 2016. Please respond to Senator Sanders.
I would just say Hillary Clinton was winning in the polls too. To take a snapshot in the polls today and apply it 16 months from now, whenever it is, I don't think is accurate. Now, in this discussion already tonight, we've talked about taking private health insurance away from union members in the industrial Midwest. We've talked about decriminalizing the border, and we've talked about giving free health care to undocumented workers.
Paul Ryan might as well just run as a Republican, honestly. This is ridiculous.
I quite frankly don't think that that is an agenda that we can move forward on and win. We've got to talk about the working class issues, the people that take a shower after work who haven't had a raise in 30 years. If we focus on them, we'll win the election.
Thank you, Congressman. I'm going to bring Congressman O'Rourke. Your response, sir?
Bernie was talking about some of the battleground states in which we compete. There's a new battleground state, Texas, and it has 38 electoral college votes. And the way that we put it in play was by going to each one of those 254 counties. No matter how red or rural, we did not write you off. No matter how blue or urban, we did not take you for granted, and we didn't trim our sails either. We had the courage of our convictions, talking about universal health care, comprehensive immigration reform, and confronting the challenge of climate before it is too late. We brought everyone in, and now we have a chance to beat Donald Trump with Texas.
Thank you, Congressman. I want to bring Governor Bullock. We're talking about whether Democrats are moving too far to the left to win the White House. President Trump won your home state of Montana by 20 points. How do you respond, sir?
Yeah, as the only one in the field of 37 that actually won a Trump state, 25 to 30% of my voters voted for Donald Trump. I know that we do have to win back some of those places we lost and get those Trump voters back if we're ever going to win. But this isn't just a choice between the left and the center. It's not a choice just between sort of these wish list economics or thinking that we have to sacrifice our values to actually win. What folks want is a fair shot. The way I want, the way we can win is actually focus on the economy and democracy aren't working for most people. That's how I win. That's how we can take back the office.
Senator Warren, you make it a point to say that you're a capitalist. Is that your way of convincing voters that you might be a safer choice than Senator Sanders?
No, it is my way of talking about I know how to fight and I know how to win. I took on giant banks and I beat them. I took on Wall Street and CEOs and their lobbyists and their lawyers, and I beat them. I took on a popular Republican incumbent senator, and I beat him. I remember when people said Barack Obama couldn't get elected. Shoot, I remember when people said Donald Trump couldn't get elected. But here's where we are. I get it. There is a lot at stake and people are scared. But we can't choose a candidate we don't believe in just because we're too scared to do anything else. And we can't ask other people to vote for a candidate we don't believe in. Democrats win when we figure out what is right and we get out there and fight for it. I am not afraid. And for Democrats to win, you can't be afraid either.
Congressman Delaney, your response?
So I think Democrats win when we run on real solutions, not impossible promises. When we run on things that are workable, not fairy tale economics. Look at the story of Detroit, this amazing city that we're in. This city is turning around because the government and the private sector are working well together. That has to be our model going forward. We need to encourage collaboration between the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector, and focus on those kitchen table, pocketbook issues that matter to hardworking Americans. Building infrastructure, creating jobs, improving their pay,
Thank you, Congressman.
creating universal health care, lowering drug prices.
Senator
We can
Warren.
do it.
You know, I don't understand why anybody goes to all the trouble of running for president of the United States just to talk about what we really can't do and shouldn't fight for.
It's a good point.
Our biggest problem in Washington is corruption.
Delaney is such a clown.
Giant corporations that have taken our government and that are holding it by the throat. And we need to have the courage to fight back against that. And until we're ready to do that, it's just more of the same. Well, I'm ready to get in this fight. I'm ready to win this
Thank you,
fight.
Senator. Congressman Delaney.
When we created Social Security, we didn't say pensions were illegal, right? We can have big ideas to transform the lives. I mean, I started 2 companies and took them public before I was 40. I'm as big of a dreamer and an entrepreneur as anyone. But I also believe we need to have solutions that are workable. Can you imagine if we tried to start Social Security now but said private pensions are illegal? That's the equivalent of what Senator Sanders and Senator Warren are proposing with health care. That's not a big idea. That's an idea that's dead on arrival. That will never happen. So why don't we actually talk about things, big ideas that we can get done? The stakes are too high.
Senator Warren.
So look, he talks,
We'll come to you right after that. Senator Warren.
he talks about solutions that are workable. We have tried the solution of Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance. And what have the private insurance companies done? They've sucked billions of dollars out of our healthcare system. They've made everybody fill out dozens and dozens of forms. Why? Not because they're trying to track your healthcare. They just want one more excuse to say no. Insurance companies do not have a God-given right to suck money out of our healthcare system.
Thank you,
And
Senator.
2020 is our chance to stop
Senator
that.
Sanders.
Detroit was mentioned, and I'm delighted Detroit is rebounding. But let us understand, Detroit was nearly destroyed because of awful trade policy, which allowed corporations to throw workers in this community out on the streets as they moved to low-wage countries. To win this election and to defeat Donald Trump, which, by the way, in my view, is not going to be easy, we need to have a campaign of energy and excitement and of vision. We need to bring millions of young people into the political process in a way that we have never seen by, among other things, making public colleges and universities tuition free and canceling student debt.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. I want to bring in Senator Klobuchar. At the beginning of the night, you said you're going to hear a lot of promises on the stage. And previously you have said, when asked about your primary opponents, quote, a lot of people are making promises, and I'm not going to make promises just to get elected. Who on the stage is making promises just to get elected?
You.
Everyone wants
You.
to be elected. But my point is this. I think
Amy
the guy
Klobuchar.
in the White House that has now told over 10,000 lies, that we better be very straightforward with the American people. And no, do I think that we are going to end up voting for a plan that kicks half of America off of their current insurance in 4 years? No, I don't think we're going to do that. I think there is a better way to get what we all want to see, which is lower costs for healthcare. Do I think that we're going to vote to give free college to the wealthiest kids? No, I don't think we're going to do that. So that's what I'm talking about. But what I don't like about this argument right now, what I don't like about it at all, is that we are more worried about winning an argument than winning an election. And I think how we win an election is to bring everyone with us. And yes, I am one in a state
Every single time statewide, I have won those congressional districts that Donald Trump won by over 20 points. He just targeted Minnesota last week. And I've done it by getting out there and talking to people, by knowing rural issues and farm issues, and bringing metro people with me in the state that had the highest voter turnout in the country.
I want to bring Congressman O'Rourke, please respond.
You know, I think a big part of leadership and showing our commitment to the American people is delivering on our commitments. As a member of Congress, when I learned that the El Paso VA had the worst wait times for mental health care in the country, meaning that care delayed functionally became care denied and was related to the suicide epidemic, we made it our priority and we turned around the VA in El Paso. We took that lesson nationally, and I worked with Republican and Democratic colleagues to expand mental health care to veterans, and we got it signed into law by the one person with whom I agree on almost nothing, Donald Trump, to show that at the end of the day, we will put the American people first, before party, before any other concern.
Thank you, Congressman O'Rourke. We've been asking voters to weigh in on what they'd most like to hear Democrats debate. Among the topics they told us they're most interested in, the climate crisis. Congressman Delaney, I'll start with you. You say the Green New Deal is about as realistic as Trump saying Mexico was going to pay for the wall. But scientists say we need essentially to eliminate fossil fuel pollution by 2050 to avoid the most catastrophic consequences. Why isn't this sweeping plan to fight the climate crisis realistic?
Well, first of all, because it ties its progress to other things that are completely unrelated to climate, like universal health care, guaranteed government jobs, and universal basic income. So that only makes it harder to do. My plan, which gets us to net zero by 2050, which we absolutely have to do for our kids and our grandkids, will get us there. I put a price on carbon, take all the money, give it back to the American people in a dividend. That was introduced by me on a bipartisan basis. It's the only significant bipartisan climate bill in the Congress. I'm going to increase the Department of Energy research budget by fivefold because we fundamentally have to innovate our way out of this problem. I'm going to create a market for something called direct air capture, which are machines that actually take carbon out of the atmosphere. Because I don't think we'll get to net zero by 2050 unless we have those things. I'm going to increase investment in renewables, and I'm going to create something called the Climate Corps. That is a plan that's realistic. It's a bet on the U.S. private innovation economy and creates the incentives to get us to net zero by 2050 for our kids.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Warren, you're a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. Your response to Congressman Delaney.
So, climate crisis is the existential crisis for our world. It puts every living thing on this planet at risk. I have a plan for a green industrial policy that takes advantage of the fact that we do what we do best, and that is innovate and create. So I've proposed putting $2 trillion in so we do the research. We then say anyone in the world can use it so long as you build it right here in America. That will produce about 1.2 million manufacturing jobs right here in Michigan, right here in Ohio, right here in the industrial Midwest. And the second thing we will do is we will then sell those products all around the world. Right now, for every $1 the United States spends trying to market around the world, China is spending $100.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Governor Hickenlooper, you take issue with the Green New Deal. Please respond.
Well, I think the guarantee for a public job for everyone who wants one is a classic part of the problem. It's a distraction. I share the urgency of everyone up here. We have to recognize, everyone's got good ideas. What we do in this country is no better than just a best practice, right? What we do here is a best practice and a template, but it's got to be done all over the world. So we've got to be building bridges right now with people like China who are cheating on international agreements and stealing intellectual property. We need to work on that, but not with the tariff system. We need every country working together if we're going to really deal with climate change in a realistic way.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Your response.
Look, I put a real policy on the table to create 1.2 million new jobs in green manufacturing. There's going to be a $23 trillion worldwide market for this. This could revitalize huge cities across this country, and no one wants to talk about it. What you want to do instead is find the Republican talking point of a made-up piece of some other part and say, oh, we don't really have to do anything. That's the problem we've got in Washington right now. It continues to be a Washington that works great for oil companies, just not for people worried about
Thank you, Senator Warren. Congressman Ryan, we are here in Michigan where there are about 180,000 workers in auto manufacturing. Your state of Ohio has around 96,000 workers in that industry. Senator Sanders is co-sponsoring a bill that would eliminate new gas-powered car sales by 2040. Given the number of auto manufacturing workers in your state, how concerned are you about Senator Sanders' plan?
Well, if we get our act together, we won't have to worry about it. My plan is to create a chief manufacturing officer so we could actually start making things in the United States again that would pull.
That's what Bernie Sanders
Department of
supports.
Energy, Department of Transportation, work with the private sector, work with investors, emerging tech companies to dominate the electric vehicle market. China dominates it now, 50 to 60%. I want us to dominate the battery market, make those here in the United States and cut the workers in on the deal. The charging stations, solar panels, same thing. China dominates 60% of the solar panel market. So this person will work in the White House, report directly to me, and we're going to start making things again. But you cannot get there on climate unless we talk about agriculture. We need to convert our industrial agriculture system over to a sustainable and regenerative agriculture system that actually sequesters carbon into the soil. And you can go ask Gabe Brown and Alan Williams, who actually make money off of regenerative agriculture. So we can move away from all the subsidies that we're giving to farmers. They haven't made a profit in 5 years, and we can start getting good food into our schools and into our communities. That's going to drive healthcare down. That's another part of the healthcare conversation that we didn't even have. How do we start talking about health instead of just disease care?
Thank you. Senator Sanders, your response?
I get a little bit tired of Democrats afraid of big ideas. Republicans are not afraid of big ideas. They could give $1 trillion in tax breaks to billionaires and profitable corporations. They could bail out the crooks on Wall Street. So please don't tell me that we cannot take on the fossil fuel industry and nothing happens unless we do that. Here is the bottom line. We've got to ask ourselves a simple question. What do you do with an industry that knowingly, for billions of dollars in short-term profits, is destroying this planet? I say that is criminal activity that cannot be allowed to continue.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Congressman, your response.
Well, yeah, I would just say, I didn't say we couldn't get there till 2040, Bernie. You don't have to yell. I mean, all I'm saying is...
You don't have to yell.
All I'm saying is, we have to invent our way out of this thing.
What is with everybody's issue and him yelling? I don't get
For a
it.
ban to come in on gasoline vehicles, we're screwed. So we better get busy now, and that's why I'm saying, get a chief manufacturing officer. Align the environmental incentives with the financial incentives and make sure that people can actually make money off of the new technologies that are moving forward. And then here's what I'll do as president, cut the worker in on the deal. Make sure these are union jobs, and I will double union membership to make sure that these new jobs pay what the old fossil fuel jobs pay.
Senator Sanders, your response.
Look, on this issue, my friends, there is no choice. We have got to be super aggressive if we love our children and if we want to leave them a planet that is healthy and is habitable. So I don't disagree with Tim. What that means is we got to A, take on the fossil fuel industry. B, it means we have to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, and a hell of a lot of good union jobs as we do that. We got to transform our transportation system, and we have to lead the world.
Thank you, Senator
this
Sanders.
is not just an American issue.
Governor Bullock, your response.
You know, all of us agree that we have to address climate change. No one on the stage is talking about, though, the Republicans won't even acknowledge that climate change is real, Dana. And that's because of the corrupting influence of money. That has been my career. And second of which, as we transition to this...
I'll admit I don't know very much about Steve Bullock, but I don't think his main fight is getting money out of politics.
Powering our country. And far too often, Democrats sound like they're part of the problem. We got to make sure to aid in those transitions as we get to a carbon neutral world, which I think we can do by 2040.
Thank you, Governor. Just to clarify, who is part of the problem?
I think Democrats often, when they're saying, oh, these fossil fuel industries, these workers, those coal mining workers, look, the world's changing, we got to make it change. But I think Democrats often sound like the people that, as Congressman Ryan would say, shower at the end of the day, that they're part of the problem. And far too many communities are being left behind as we make this transition.
Thank you.
Look, we're having this discussion, and we can talk about competing
Thank
plans.
you, Governor. I want to give Senator Sanders a chance to respond.
Look, Steve, ain't nobody in the Congress who's more strongly pro-worker than I am. So when I talk about taking on the fossil fuel industry, what I am also talking about is a just transition. All right? We can create, and what the Green New Deal is about, it's a bold idea. We can create millions of good paying jobs. We can rebuild communities in rural America that have been devastated. So we are not anti-worker. We are going to provide, make sure that those workers have a transition, new jobs,
Thank you,
healthcare,
Senator.
education.
And look,
Governor Bullock, your response?
and look, Bernie, I was a union side labor lawyer. I fought day after day. And I know, but we set this up as a false choice far too often. Are we going to actually address climate change? Fire seasons are 80 days longer in the West now. Or are we going to give people a better shot at a better life? You can do both, but let's actually have the scientists drive this. Let's not just talk about plans that are written for press releases that will go nowhere else if we can't get a Republican to acknowledge that the climate's changing.
Congressman O'Rourke,
I've
your
listened to
response.
scientists on this, and they're very clear. We don't have more than 10 years to get this right, and we won't meet that challenge with half steps or half measures or only half the country. We've got to bring everyone in. The people of Detroit and those that I listened to in Flint last week, they want the challenge. They want those jobs. They want to create the future for this country and the world. Those community college students that I met in Tucumcari, New Mexico, understand that wind and solar jobs are the fastest growing jobs in the country. And those farmers in Iowa say, pay me for the environmental services of planting cover crops and keeping more land in conservation easements. That's how we meet the challenge. We do it with everyone in this country. We bring everyone into the solution.
Thank you, Congressman. Mayor Buttigieg, your response.
We have all put out highly similar visions on climate. It is all theoretical. We will deal with climate if and only if we win the presidency, if and only if we beat Donald Trump. Nominate me, and you get to see the President of the United States stand next to an American war veteran and explain why he chose to pretend to be disabled when it was his chance to serve. Nominate me and we will have a different conversation with American voters about why the President of the United States thinks you're a sucker, when the problem in your life is your paycheck is not going up nearly as fast as the cost of housing or the cost of education or the cost of prescription drugs, and he has done nothing about it except a tax cut for the corporation.
Senator Klobuchar, I want to ask you about something that CNN heard from a Michigan Democratic primary voter. We were reaching out and getting their questions. Kimber from Birmingham, Michigan has this question. What is your plan to address infrastructure, including the water issues, so another Flint, Michigan does not happen again?
Thank you, Dana. And I was just in Flint. And they are still drinking bottled water in that town, and that is outrageous. So my plan, and I am the first one that came out with an infrastructure plan, and I did that because this is a bread and butter issue. It's a bread and butter issue for people that are caught in traffic jams. I think the governor here in Michigan smartly ran on the slogan, fix the damn roads. And it is an issue for union jobs. And so I think what we need to do is not have a president that's promised he was going to do that on election night, if anyone remembers, and then he hasn't followed through. He has done nothing. He blew up a meeting at the White House. I would put $1 trillion into this, and I would pay for it by, first of all, changing the capital gains rate, by doing something when it comes to that regressive tax bill that left everyone behind, but really made his Mar-a-Lago friends richer, as he promised. And I would take that money and put it into rural broadband and green infrastructure, so you won't have what you just saw in Detroit with the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood, the African neighborhood that was African-American neighborhood that was most hit when you had those recent rainstorms. And I truly believe that if we're going to move on infrastructure and climate change, you need a voice from the heartland.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Ms. Williamson, what's your response on the Flint water crisis?
My response on the Flint water crisis is that Flint is just the tip of the iceberg. I was recently in Denmark, South Carolina, where there is a lot of talk about it being the next Flint. We have an administration that has gutted the Clean Water Act. We have communities, particularly communities of color and disadvantaged communities all over this country, who are suffering from environmental injustice. I assure you, I lived in Grosse Pointe. What happened in Flint would not have happened in Grosse Pointe. This is part of the dark underbelly of American society.
Nice.
Racism, the bigotry, and the entire conversation that we're having here tonight, if you think any of this wonkiness is going to deal with this dark psychic force of the collectivized hatred that this president is bringing up in this country, then I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to see some very dark days. We need to say it like it is. It's bigger than Flint. It's all over this country. It's particularly people of color. It's particularly people who do not have the money to fight back. And if the Democrats don't start saying it, then why would those people feel that they're there for us? And if those people don't feel it, they won't vote for us. And Donald Trump will win.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williamson. We want to turn now to the issue of race in America. Congressman O'Rourke, President Trump is pursuing a re-election strategy based in part on racial division. How do you convince primary voters that you'd be the best nominee to take on President Trump and heal the racial divide in America?
We'll call his racism out for what it is and also talk about its consequences. It doesn't just offend our sensibilities to hear him say, send her back, about a member of Congress because she's a woman of color, because she's a Muslim American. It doesn't just offend our sensibilities when he calls Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals, or seeks to ban all Muslims from the shores of a country that is comprised of people from the world over, from every tradition of faith. It is also changing this country. Hate crimes are on the rise, every single one of the last 3 years. On the day that he signed his executive order attempting to ban Muslim travel, the mosque in Victoria, Texas, was burned to the ground. So we must not only stand up against Donald Trump and defeat him in this next election, but we must also ensure that we don't just tolerate or respect our differences, but we embrace them. That's what we've learned in El Paso, Texas, my hometown, one of the safest cities in the United States of America, not despite, but because it's a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. We will show that our diversity is our strength in my administration.
Congressman O'Rourke, thank you very much. Governor Hickenlooper, why are you the best nominee to heal the racial divide in America? Please respond.
Well, the core value behind this entire country's history is working towards a more perfect union, that all people are created equal, and we've fallen far away from that. I think the job is incumbent on any one of us to make the convincing case that we can deliver an urban agenda that represents progress in schools. Colorado, when I was mayor, we got to universal pre-K for every kid in the urban city. We did major police reform 10 years before Ferguson. Why is it now that 5 years after Ferguson we still don't have anything? How do we get affordable housing? We create a scholarship fund for every kid. You got to deliver a vision like that for the whole country.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Warren, I'm coming to you now. Last week, the FBI Director Christopher Wray said that the majority of domestic terrorism cases this year have been motivated by white supremacy. In fact, the alleged shooter in this weekend's attack in Gilroy, California, referenced a well-known white supremacist book on social media. How are you going to combat the rise of white supremacy?
We need to call out white supremacy for what it is, domestic terrorism. And it poses a threat to the United States of America. We live in a country now where the president is advancing environmental racism, economic racism, criminal justice racism, healthcare racism. The way we do better is to fight back and show something better. So I have a plan, for example, on education that says we have to build a better education system for all our kids, but we've got to acknowledge what's happened on race. So my plan has universal tuition-free college for all of our kids, but also increases the Pell Grants and levels the playing field by putting $50 billion into historically black colleges and universities. It cancels student loan debt for 95% of the kids with student loan debt and helps close the black-white wealth gap in America.
Thank you, Senator, very much. Mayor Buttigieg, you have been criticized for your handling of racial issues in your home city of South Bend, from diversity in the police force
Answer
to
that shit,
housing
dog.
policy. Given your record, how can you convince African Americans that you should be the Democratic nominee?
As an urban mayor serving a diverse community, the racial divide lives within me. I'm not saying that I became mayor and racism or crime or poverty ended on my watch. But in our city, we have come together repeatedly to tackle challenges like the fact that far too many people were not getting the help they needed in their housing, and so we directed it to a historically underinvested African-American neighborhood. Right now, in the wake of a police-involved shooting, our community is moving from hurting to healing by making sure that the community can participate in things like advising the use of force policy and making sure there are community voices on the Board of Safety.
The judge only did this after that shit happened and after it was called out.
Tackle this issue nationally because mayors have hit the limits of what you can do unless there is national action. Systemic racism has touched every part of American life, from housing to health to home ownership. If you walk into an emergency room and you are black, your reports of pain will be taken less seriously. If you apply for a job and you are black, you are less likely to be called just because of the name on the resume. It's why I've proposed that we do everything from investing in historically redlined neighborhoods to build black wealth in home ownership.
Thank you, Mayor.
To supporting entrepreneurship for black
Thank you very much. Senator Klobuchar, what do you say to those Trump voters who prioritize the economy over the president's bigotry?
Well, first of all, there are people that voted for Donald Trump before that aren't racist. They just wanted a better shake in the economy. And so I would appeal to them. But I don't think anyone can justify what this president is doing. Little kids literally woke up this weekend, turned on the TV, and saw their president calling their city, the town of Baltimore, nothing more than a home for rats. And I can tell you, as your president, that will stop. The second thing I would say is that economic opportunity means economic opportunity for everyone in this country. I know that because I have lived it. And that means when we put out there better child care and a better education, and we pay teachers more, and we make sure there's a decent retirement system in place, yes, we help the African American community, and we must, because they have been the ones that have been most hurt by what we've seen in the last decades. But we help everyone. So what I say to the people in my rural parts of my state, just like I say to them in the city and bring them together, is that economic opportunity must be there for everyone.
Klobuchar, thank you very much. Congressman O'Rourke, please respond.
I want to acknowledge something that we're all touching on, which is the very foundation of this country. The wealth that we have built, the way we became the greatest country on the face of the planet, was literally on the backs of those who were kidnapped and brought here by force. The legacy of slavery and segregation and Jim Crow and suppression is alive and well in every aspect of the economy and in the country. Today, as president, I will sign into law a new Voting Rights Act. I will focus on education, address healthcare disparities, but I will also sign into law Sheila Jackson Lee's reparations bill so that we can have the national conversation we have waited too long in this country to have.
Thank you, Congressman O'Rourke. Speaking of reparations, Ms. Williamson, many of your opponents support a commission to study the issue of reparations for slavery. But you are calling for up to $500 billion in financial assistance. What makes you qualified to determine how much is owed in reparations?
Well, first of all, it's not $500 billion in financial assistance. It's $500 billion, $200 to $500 billion, payment of a debt that is owed. That is what reparations is. We need some deep truth-telling when it comes. We don't need another commission to look at evidence. I appreciate what Congressman O'Rourke has said. It is time for us to simply realize that this country will not heal. All that a country is a collection of people. People heal when there's some deep truth-telling. We need to recognize that when it comes to the economic gap between blacks and whites in America, it does come from a great injustice that has never been dealt with. That great injustice has had to do with the fact that there was 250 years of slavery followed by another 100 years of domestic terrorism. What makes me qualified to say $200 to $500 billion? I'll tell you what makes me qualified. If you did the math of the 40 acres and a mule, given that there was 4 to 5 million slaves at the end of the Civil War, there were 4 to 5, and they were all promised 40 acres and a mule for every family of 4. If you did the math today, it would be trillions of dollars. And I believe that anything less than $100 billion is an insult, and I believe that $200 to $500 billion is politically feasible today because so many Americans realize there is an injustice that continues to form a toxicity underneath the surface, an emotional turbulence that only reparations.
Thank you very much. Senator Sanders. Sanders, you don't think cash payments are the best way to address this issue, but according to a new Gallup poll, 73% of African Americans are in favor of cash payments to black Americans who are descendants of slaves. How do you respond to that?
Well, I respond to that by saying that I am supportive of Jim Clyburn's legislation, which is called 10-20-30. And what that understands is that as a result of slavery and segregation and the institutional racism we see now in healthcare, in education, in financial services, we are going to have to focus big time on rebuilding distressed communities in America, including African American communities. In terms of education, I also have a plan. It's called the Thurgood Marshall Plan, and it would focus on ending the growth of segregated schools in America. It would triple funding for Title I schools. It would make sure that teachers in this country earned at least $60,000 a year.
Senator Sanders, thank you very much. The debate continues right after this short break.
Every day.
You know, it seems like they're giving a lot of time to, and this is something Klinsky was tweeting about, they're giving a lot of time to candidates that are polling at like 0 or 1% or 2%, somewhere in the single digits, low single digits. And honestly, especially in the second half of the debate, I don't feel like I'm hearing a lot of Bernie, and I'm not hearing a ton of Warren, and it's kind of strange. You're hearing a lot of Bullock, and you're hearing a lot of Buttigieg and O'Rourke. Delaney has not said too much in this second half. Definitely not as much as the first one, but he's still getting a lot of airtime, which is annoying. So I don't know, man. I mean, but listen, when it comes to these mainstream media, debates and just their overall coverage, they're going to do this kind of stuff, and they're going to appeal to the candidates that they feel like, well, they are saying the things that they think people want to hear, when in reality it's not. I don't know. I mean, that's what they do. There's nothing else you can really rely on from the mainstream media. You can't really rely on them being principled, because a lot of it is going to come from the kind of the mentality of like, well, I got to do what's going to, what my bosses, what my network bosses are going to say, and if I don't do that, then I might get, fucking, I don't know, disciplined or demoted or something, So it's, I get the situation that they're in, but it's annoying, and on a larger scale, I just can't stand it. So, but I mean, what do you expect when it comes to these? When it comes to these mainstream media, networks, that's how they're going to do. They're going to appeal to what they, what their corporate bosses want, basically, and I guess this is what we should expect, and we should really get that angry about it, because this is what always happens. However, we're still going to get angry. I know I'm definitely going to get angry, but it's almost like it's like slamming your hand against a wall and just getting nowhere with it. That seems to be how this kind of shit works. And unless we're able to actually, like people like me who host the podcast and everything, we're actually able to get on these channels and state our opinions, which they will never do. Only a select few have been able to get on mainstream media channels like Kyle and Cenk from TYT and stuff, and from TYT. Other than that, yeah, they don't want to hear from us. They don't want to hear from what we have to say, because a lot of times they're trying to appeal to the establishment, neoliberal, neocon, corporatist type guests, and those are the people that they know will say the things that isn't going to go too overboard, at least in their minds, even though they're pushing for warmongering policies and stuff that people don't actually support, but they think, they're so out of touch, they don't know any fucking better, so they think that's the stuff that people want to hear. All right, we're back.
Welcome back to the CNN Democratic presidential debate live from Detroit. Let's turn now to the economy. Congressman Ryan, President Trump's tariffs have boosted the U.S. steel industry, but hurt auto manufacturers like those here in Michigan, which could drive up the cost of cars. As president, would you continue President Trump's steel tariffs?
Look, I think President Trump was on to something when he talked about China. China has been abusing the economic system for a long time. They steal intellectual property. They subsidize goods coming into this country. They've displaced steel workers, auto workers across the board, eroded our manufacturing, and we basically transferred our wealth of our middle class either up to the top 1% or to China for them to build their military. So I think we need some targeted response against China. But you know how you beat China? You outcompete them. And that's why I put a chief manufacturing officer in place to make sure that we rebuild the manufacturing base. We've got to fill these factories that in Detroit and Youngstown that used to make cars and steel. We've got to fill them with workers who are making electric vehicles, batteries, charging stations, make sure they're making solar panels. As I said earlier, China dominates 60% of the solar panel market. They dominate 50 to 60% of the electric vehicle market. We're going to make 10 million electric vehicles somewhere in the world in the next 10 years. I want them made in the United States. That's why I have a chief manufacturing officer that will sit in the White House and help drive this agenda.
Thank you. Just as a point of clarification, as president, would you continue President Trump's steel tariffs, yes or no?
Well, I would have to reevaluate. I think some of them are effective, but he's bungled the whole thing, obviously. See, here's the problem with President Trump. He has a tactical move, one of many. He has a tactical move. What's the grand strategy for the United States? China has a 100-year plan, a 50-year plan, a 30-year plan, a 20-year plan. We live in a 24-hour news cycle. That spells disaster for our economy and disaster for global politics.
Thank you, Congressman. Congressman Delaney, your response.
So listen, this is what I don't understand. President Trump wants to build physical walls and beats up on immigrants. Most of the folks running for president want to build economic walls to free trade and beat up on President Obama. I'm the only one running for president who actually supports the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Who cares
President
about
Obama was right about
slandering
that.
President
We should
Obama?
be getting back in that. Senator Warren just issued a trade plan that would prevent the United States from trading with its allies. We can't isolate ourselves from the world. We have to engage with fair, rules-based
Thank you,
trade.
Congressman Delaney. Senator Warren, please respond.
You know, for decades, we have had a trade policy that has been written by giant multinational corporations to help giant multinational corporations. They have no loyalty to America. They have no patriotism. If they can save a nickel by moving a job to Mexico, they'll do it in a heartbeat. If they can continue a polluting plant by moving it to Vietnam, they'll do it in a heartbeat. I have put out a new comprehensive plan that says we're not going to do it that way. We're going to negotiate our deals with unions at the table, with small businesses at the table, with small farmers at the table, with environmentalists at the table, with human rights activists at the table. And then we're going to use the fact that everybody in the world wants to get to America's markets. They want to sell to you.
Congressman Delaney.
Is everyone wants to get to America's markets? No. So the question
Senator,
is,
thank you.
how
Please abide by the
we
rules.
need to
Congressman
raise
Delaney, it's
our
your turn. Thank you,
standards.
Senator. Congressman Delaney.
So that was the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think President Obama was right. He did include environmental standards. He did include labor standards. We would be in an entirely different position with China if we had entered the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We can't isolate ourselves from the world. We can't isolate ourselves from Asia. Senator Warren's plan basically that she put out, we would not be able to trade with the United Kingdom. We would not be able to trade with the EU. It is so extreme that it'll isolate the American economy from the rest of the world.
Senator.
Senator Warren.
Senator Sanders, please let Senator Warren respond.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What the congressman is describing as extreme is having deals that are negotiated by American workers for American workers. American workers want those jobs, and we can build the trade deals that do it. people want access to our markets all around the world, then the answer is let's make them raise their standards, make them pay their workers more, let their workers unionize, raise their environmental standards before they come to us and say they want to be able to sell their products. Right now, the whole game is working for the big multinationals. It's just not working for the people here in the United States,
Senator,
and we can
thank you very
change
much.
that.
Congressman O'Rourke, your response.
You know, the question was about tariffs, and they're a huge mistake. They constitute the largest tax increase on the American consumer, hitting the middle class and the working poor especially hard. And farmers in Iowa and across the country are bearing the brunt of the consequences. When have we ever gone to war, including a trade war, without allies and friends and partners? As president, we will hold China accountable, but we will bring our allies and friends like the European Union to bear, and we'll also negotiate trade deals that favor farmers and American workers and protect human rights and the environment and labor, not just here in the United States, but in those
Thank you very much.
countries.
Senator Sanders, please respond to Congressman O'Rourke.
Yeah, okay. You're looking, I believe, at the only member of Congress who not only voted against these disastrous trade agreements, NAFTA, PNTR with China, which cost us over 4 million jobs, but also helped lead the effort against these agreements. Now, Elizabeth is absolutely right. If anybody here thinks that corporate America gives one damn about the average American worker, you're mistaken. If they can save 5 cents by going to China, Mexico, or Vietnam, or any place else, that's exactly what they would do. As president, let me tell you what I will do. These guys line up at the federal trough. They want military contracts. They want all kinds of contracts. Well, under my administration, you ain't going to get those contracts if you throw American workers out on the street.
Thank you very much. Governor Hickenlooper, your response.
So I think Congressman Delaney has got a point here, and there is a way of looking at trade that is therapeutic. The bottom line is, you talk to any economist, there is not a single example in history where a trade war had a winner. Trade wars are for losers. And the bottom line is, you got to recognize, let's negotiate a better trade deal, but you're not going to win against China in a trade war when they've got 25% of our total debt. And step back and look at, here's Trump gives a giant tax cut, and at the same time, so we're paying in tariffs about $800 to $1,200 per household, and then we give this incredible tax cut to the rich. Essentially, what's happening is now he's transferred that tax obligation onto the middle class. That's what's outrageous, but tariffs are not the solution.
Governor, thank you. Senator Warren.
Anyone who thinks that these trade deals are mostly about tariffs just doesn't understand what's going on. Look at the new NAFTA 2.0. What's the central feature? It's to help pharmaceutical companies get longer periods of exclusivity so they can charge Canadians, Americans, and Mexicans more money and make more profits. That's what trade deals have become. They have become a way for giant multinationals to change the regulatory environment so they can suck more profits out for themselves and to leave the American people behind. We have to have the courage to fight back against that.
Senator, thank you. Governor Bullock, your response?
You know, Farmer in Rippey said to me, every time that Trump tweets, we lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. If Montana had to eat all the wheat that we produce, every Montanan would have to eat 40 loaves of bread a day. But by the same token, what we have is, I actually agree with Senator Warren on this in part. Corporations can move capital easy. Workers can't move. So going forward, we need to make sure that our trade deals actually are protecting, thinking about the workers. They can't be the stepchild, but the way to do it with this blunt instrument of tariffs that the president's doing, that's not how we get a fair deal for farmers anywhere or the manufacturers here in Detroit.
Governor, thank you very much. Mayor, stand by, please. Stand by, please. Please abide by the rules. Mayor Buttigieg, on Thursday of this week, Virginia plant in Michigan,
Debate motors are so bad.
The latest auto plant to cease operations in the industrial Midwest. This comes as part of the company's modernization plans, which will eventually result in 6,000 hourly workers losing their jobs or being reassigned to other plants. What is your plan for retraining workers whose jobs are at risk?
This happened in my community 20 years before I was born, and when I was growing up, we were still picking up the pieces. Empty factories, empty houses, poverty. I know exactly what happens to a community when these closures take place, and there will be more. It's why we actually need to put the interests of workers first. Of course we need to do retraining. We're doing it now in South Bend. We should continue to do it, but this is so much bigger than a trade fight. This is about a moment when the economy is changing before our eyes. There are people in the gig economy who go through more jobs in a week than my parents went through in their lifetime. It's why I've proposed that we allow gig workers to unionize, because a gig is a job and a worker is a worker.
Thank you, Mayor.
We have to respond to all of these changes and, in addition to confronting tech, in addition to supporting workers by doubling unionization as I propose to do, some of this is low tech too. Like the minimum wage is just too low. And so-called conservative Christian senators right now in the Senate are blocking a bill to raise the minimum wage when Scripture says that whoever oppresses the poor taunts their maker.
Mayor, thank you very much. Congressman Delaney, I'm coming to you now. Your estimated net worth is more than $65 million. That would make you subject to Senator Warren's proposed wealth tax on the assets of the richest 75,000 homes, households, or so in the United States. Do you think Senator Warren's wealth tax is a fair way to fund child care and education?
I think wealthy Americans have to pay more. Listen, I grew up in a blue-collar family. First in my family to go to college, became a successful entrepreneur, created thousands of jobs, supported thousands of entrepreneurs all around this country. And I've done well financially. I think I should pay more in tax. I think wealthy Americans should pay more in tax. But we have to have a real solution. The real solution is to raise the capital
CNN is
gains
clearly
rates.
trying to give
There is
Delaney
no reason why people who
more attention.
invest for a living
It's so
should
obvious.
pay less than people who work for a living. That's ridiculous. It's the biggest loophole in our tax code. We act like wealthy individuals are endangered species. And if we raise their taxes, they won't invest. That's crazy. That's how we get more revenues from wealthy individuals. We roll back the Trump tax cuts to wealthy individuals. I think the wealth tax will be fought in court forever. It's arguably unconstitutional, and the countries that have had it have largely abandoned it because it's impossible to implement. But here again, real solutions, not impossible promises.
Thank you.
Raise the capital gains tax, roll back the taxes on wealthy Americans.
Thank
that
you,
we can do in our first few months as president.
Please respond.
So I have proposed a wealth tax. It's now time to do that. It's time to tax the top 0.1% of fortunes in this country. Your first $50 million you can keep free and clear, but your 50 millionth and first dollar, you got to pitch in 2 cents. 2 cents. What can America do with 2 cents? We can provide universal child care for every baby in this country aged 0 to 5. We can provide universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old. We can raise the wages of every child care worker and preschool teacher in this country. We can provide universal tuition-free college. We can expand Pell. We can put $50 billion into our historically black colleges and universities, and we can cancel student loan debt for 95% of the people who have it and start to close the wealth gap in America. It tells you how badly broken this economy is. That 2 cents from the wealthiest in this country would let us invest in the rest of America.
This is not about whether wealthy Americans should pay more. I'm in agreement on that. It's a question of, do you have a real solution to make it happen?
Stop giving this guy fucking chances to respond.
The ordinary income. You know, the last president to do that was
Get
actually
on to somebody else.
We can do that in our first year. I've called for that to be done, and it'll double the earned income tax credit. I've called for the expansion of universal pre-K so that every American has pre-K, and I do it through an additional tax on high net worth individuals. But we don't need to come up with new taxes that are arguably unconstitutional.
Thank you, Congressman Delaney.
We'll be fought in court for years.
I want to turn to the issue of student debt. We're going to turn to the issue of student debt now, Mayor Buttigieg. You've talked about how you and your husband are paying down 6 figures of student loan debt. Under Senator Sanders' proposal to cancel all student loan debt, yours would immediately be wiped away. Why wouldn't you support that?
That'd be great for us. And then the next day, there would be a student loan program, and people would be out taking student loans wondering why they weren't lucky enough in timing to get theirs wiped away completely too. We can have debt-free college for low and middle-income students by expanding Pell Grants and compelling states to pick up more of the burden. And on the back end, for those of us who do have a lot of debt, we can make it more affordable, and we can expand a public service loan forgiveness program, which is an excellent program that is almost impossible to actually get access to right now. We can take these steps and have an approach that is actually fair. If we want to start wiping away student debt, here's where I would start. I would start with the for-profit colleges that took advantage of people, especially veterans, by the way. The moment I redeployed, my Facebook ad feed started filling with ads from these for-profit colleges. Under President Obama, they were held accountable for whether they delivered results. President Trump, under a Secretary of Education, who regrettably is from this state, did away with those rules. There's no accountability. On my watch, those colleges that turned the Department of Education into a predatory lender, that's where we would begin when it came to getting rid of loans.
Thank you, Mayor Buttigieg. Senator Sanders, you want to forgive all student loan debt? Your response?
I do. But before I get into that, the major issue that we don't talk about in Congress, we don't talk about in the media, is the massive level of income and wealth inequality in America. You got 3 people who own more wealth than the bottom 90%. You got top 1% that owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Companies like Amazon and billionaires out there do not pay 1 nickel in federal income tax. And we've got 500,000 people sleeping out on the street. What we need is a political revolution that tells these billionaires and corporate America that they are Americans, they'll participate in our society, but they have got to start paying their fair share of taxes. Period.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Ms. Williamson, you are proposing to make college free for all qualified students. Should the government pay for children from wealthier families to go to college?
I think that all domestic and international policy should be based on the idea that anything we do to help people thrive is a stimulation to our economy. That's how you stimulate your economy. So if a few people take advantage, but there are 4 or 5 people who are going to take the money that they then have in the bank. When you look at this $1.5 trillion college debt, this is why I agree with Bernie, or I would be even, okay, why don't we swap it? We had a $2 trillion tax cut where 83 cents of every dollar goes to the very, very richest among us. That does not stimulate the economy. If we get rid of this college debt, think of all the young people who will have the discretionary spending. They'll be able to start their business. The best thing you could do to stimulate the U.S. economy is to get rid of this debt. This is not just about a plan to do it. It's about a philosophy of governing. And I've heard some people here tonight, I almost wonder why you're Democrats. You seem to think there's something wrong about using the instruments of government to help people. That is what government should do. All policy should help people thrive. That is how we will have peace, and that is how we will have prosperity.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Congressman O'Rourke, you don't support free 4-year college. Your response to Ms. Williamson?
I support free 2-year college. Earn a bachelor's degree, realize your full potential, debt-free 4-year college. But unlike some of the other candidates on the stage, that's not just for tuition. That is room and books and board, the full cost of being able to better yourself so that you can better this country. And then for that school teacher, who in many places like Texas is working a second or a third job, full forgiveness for her outstanding student loan debt, forgiveness for that person willing to work at the VA and serve our former service members. And we do not do that at the expense of unions. We elevate them as well and make it easier to join an apprenticeship to learn a skill or a trade that you can command for the rest of your life.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Klobuchar, your response.
I want to make it easier for kids to go to college, and I think we do it by focusing our resources on the people that need it most. And my problem with some of these plans is they literally would pay for wealthy kids.
Oh my God, get the fuck out of here, bro.
There's no difference. It says everyone is free. I don't think that makes sense. And I'm very concerned if we do things like that, the debt we're going to pass on to the next generation and the next generation. So what I would do about student loan debt is that I would allow people to refinance it at a better rate, and I would make sure that we improve those student loan repayment programs for our teachers and expand them so that you literally over 5-10 years can paid for if you go into occupations where we don't have enough workers. I think we need to mesh what we were just talking about with the economy with our education policy.
Thank you, Senator. I want to turn to foreign policy now. Senator Sanders, President Trump has argued that the United States cannot continue to be the, quote, policeman of the world. You said the exact same thing on a debate stage in 2016. If voters are hearing the same message from you and President Trump on the issue of military intervention, how should they expect that you will be any different from him?
Trump is a pathological liar. I tell the truth. We have been in Afghanistan, I think, 18 years, in Iraq, 16 or 17 years. We have spent $5 trillion on the war on terror, and there are probably more terrorists out there now than before it began. We're going to spend, the Congress passed, and I will not vote for, a $715 billion military budget, more than the 10 next countries combined. What we need is a foreign policy that focuses on diplomacy, ending conflicts by people sitting at a table, not by killing each other. As President of the United States, I will go to the United Nations and not denigrate it, not attack the UN, but bring countries together in the Middle East and all over the world to come to terms with their differences and solve those problems peacefully. The United States cannot be the policeman of the world.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Hickenlooper, how do you respond to Senator Sanders' vision for America's role in the world?
Well, we share the recognition of the incredible costs. People don't realize that half the soldiers that fought in Iraq and Afghanistan were National Guard. So I went and sent them off on their deployments, big, noisy hangars, but I also mourned with their families when they didn't come back. We are able now to, I call it constant engagement, but we should have an international diplomatic approach where we're talking to everybody. Because if we're going to deal with climate change and cybersecurity and nuclear proliferation, we've got to be talking to everybody. And tariff wars don't work. They're for losers.
Thank you, Governor. I want to go to Congressman Ryan, and I want to turn to the subject of North Korea, which just hours ago launched 2 short-range ballistic missiles for the second time in less than a week. Congressman, you said that you would not meet with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un unless you were at least close to a deal. Now, Senator Klobuchar says that she would, quote, always be willing to meet with leaders to discuss policies. Is that view wrong?
Yeah, I think so. I love Amy Klobuchar, but I think she's wrong on this one. I don't think presidents of the United States meet with dictators. We saw what just happened with President Trump. He goes to the demilitarized zone with the leader of North Korea.
What's wrong with that?
Huge photo op. Gives him global credibility because the most powerful person.
So what? You're not supposed to meet with a fucking.
And weeks
you're not supposed to meet with a leader that's
that doesn't make any
not
sense.
a fucking ally. I don't get it. So what are you in
foreign
favor of
policy.
then?
We've got to make sure that we are engaging these countries all the time. This is very difficult work. I've been in Congress 17 years. I sit on the Defense Appropriations Committee. I sat on the Armed Services Committee. This is long, tedious work, much of it done outside of the eye of the TV camera. And as president, you've got to monitor that and be very disciplined every day. Don't go give a dictator a huge win. Sit down and do your job. And the same thing with what's happening in Central America. He's cutting the State Department budget. Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, where the migrants are coming from, go fix the problem at its source and use diplomacy to do it.
Senator Klobuchar, your response?
I think we agree. I just think you have to leave open the possibility of meeting with anyone at any place. What I don't like is how this president has handled it. You've heard of the Truman Doctrine, the Monroe Doctrine. He's done the go it alone doctrine with the rest of the world. He's taken us out of the climate change agreement, out of the Iran nuclear agreement, out of the Russian nuclear agreement, and I don't agree with that. And when he was just with Vladimir Putin at the G20, when he was asked about invading our democracy, he made a joke. Hundreds of thousands of Americans have lost their lives on the battlefield to protect our democracy and our right to vote. 4 little girls in Birmingham, Alabama, lost their life in a church at the height of the Civil Rights Amendment. So I do believe you meet with people, but you better have an agenda, and you better put our interests of our country first, not the Russians.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Mayor Buttigieg, you served in Afghanistan.
where just yesterday 2 U.S. service members were killed. There are currently about 14,000 U.S. service members in Afghanistan. You've said, quote, one thing everybody can agree on is that we're getting out of Afghanistan. Will you withdraw all U.S. service members by the end of your first year in office?
We will withdraw. We have to.
In your first year?
Yes. Look, around the world, we will do whatever it takes to keep America safe. But I thought I was one of the last troops leaving Afghanistan when I thought I was turning out the lights years ago. Every time I see news about somebody being killed in Afghanistan, I think about what it was like to hear an explosion over there and wonder whether it was somebody that I served with, somebody that I knew, a friend, roommate, colleague. We're pretty close to the day when we will wake up to the news of a casualty in Afghanistan who was not born on 9/11. I was sent into that war by a congressional authorization as well as a president. And we need to talk not only about the need for a president committed to ending endless war, but the fact that Congress has been asleep at the switch. And on my watch, I will propose that any authorization for the use of military force have a 3-year sunset and have to be renewed. Because if men and women in the military have the courage to go serve, members of Congress ought to have to summon the courage to vote on whether they ought to be there.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to bring in Congressman O'Rourke. Congressman O'Rourke, returning to the question whether you would withdraw all U.S. service members from Afghanistan during your first year in office as president. How do you respond, sir?
I would, in my first term in office, agree that there is nothing about perpetuating this war already in its 18th year that will make it any better. We've satisfied the reasons for our involvement in Afghanistan in the first place, and it's time to bring those service members back home from Afghanistan, but also from Iraq, also from Yemen and Somalia and Libya and Syria. There is no reason for us to be at war all over the world tonight. As president, I will end those wars.
That's actually a decent
We will not
answer.
start new wars. We will not send more U.S. service members overseas to sacrifice their lives and to take the lives of others in our name. We can resolve these challenges peacefully and diplomatically.
Governor Hickenlooper, you disagree. You've said that you're open to keeping some service members in Afghanistan beyond your first term.
I look at it as a humanitarian issue, and with all due respect, you're looking at the condition of women. If we completely pull our troops out of there, you're going to see a humanitarian disaster that will startle and frighten every man, woman, and child in this country. And I don't think, we have troops in over 400 different locations around the world. Most of them are small, they're peacekeeping, they're not greatly at risk. We're going to have to be in Afghanistan. Look at the progress that's happened in that country. We're going to turn our backs and walk away from people that have risked their lives to help us and build a different future for Afghanistan and that part of the world?
Thank you, Governor. Senator Warren, you want to make it U.S. policy that the U.S. will never use a nuclear weapon unless another country uses one first. Now, President Obama reportedly considered that policy, but ultimately decided against it. Why should the U.S. tie its own hands with that policy?
Because it makes the world safer. The United States is not going to use nuclear weapons preemptively, and we need to say so to the entire world. It reduces the likelihood that someone miscalculates, someone misunderstands. Our first responsibility is to keep ourselves safe. And what's happening right now with Donald Trump as they keep expanding the different ways that we have nuclear weapons, the different ways that they could be used, puts us all at risk. We talk about what's happening around the world. I have 3 older brothers who served in the military. I see that they would do anything. Our military is the best on earth. But we should not be asking our military to take on jobs that do not have a military solution. We need to use our diplomatic tools, our economic tools, and if we're going to send someone into war, we better have a plan for how we're going to get them out on the other end.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Bullock, your response to Senator Warren's proposal to the U.S. never use a nuclear weapon first?
I wouldn't want to take that off the table. I think America's strength, we have to be able to say that. Look, never, I hope, certainly in my term or anyone else, would we really even get close to pulling that trigger. But by the same
But then why wouldn't you take it off?
America's strength, and look, this president's made America versus America alone. Our allies no longer trust us. Our adversaries are with us.
But going from a position of strength, we should be negotiating down so there aren't nuclear weapons. But drawing those lines in the sand at this point, I wouldn't do.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Warren, your response?
Look, we don't expand trust around the world by saying, we might be the first ones to use a nuclear weapon. That puts the entire world at risk and puts us at risk right in the middle of this. At a time when Donald Trump is pulling out of our nuclear negotiations, expanding the opportunities for nuclear proliferation around the world, has pulled us out of the deal in Iran, and Iran is now working on its nuclear weapon. The world gets closer and closer to nuclear warfare. We have to have an announced policy that is one the entire world can live with. We need to make that clear. We will respond if someone else does, but
Governor
not
Bullock,
first.
please respond.
Part I agree with. But by the same token, we need to get back to nuclear proliferation.
What?
But when you have folks proliferation, reducing them, but at the same time, when you actually have Korea, when you have others, I don't want to turn around and say, well, Detroit has to be gone before we would ever use that. When so many crazy folks are getting closer to having a nuclear weapon, I don't want them to think I could strike this country and I and we as the United States of America wouldn't do a thing. Part of the strength really is the ability
Governor
to
Bullock.
deter.
Governor, thank you very much. Moving on now.
Can I answer
Moving on now, please, Senator. Senator, please. Moving on now. As you know, to serve as President of the United States, all of you know this, you have to be at least 35 years old. So, Mayor Buttigieg, you just qualified. You're 37, the youngest candidate in this field. Standing next to you is the oldest candidate, Bernie Sanders, at age 77.
Oh, God, here we go with
Should
ageism.
voters take into consideration age when choosing a presidential candidate?
I don't care how old you are. I care about your vision. But I do think it matters that we have a new generation of leaders stepping up around the world. Leaders like I actually think it's good that the Prime Minister of New Zealand's gotten a lot of attention in Democratic debates. She's masterful. She is younger than I would be when I take office. This is the kind of trend America might be leading instead of following, but only if it's actually backed by the right vision. And we can have great presidents at any age. What I will say is we need the kind of vision that's going to win. We cannot have a vision that amounts to back to normal. The only reason we got this president is that normal didn't work. We have to be ready to take on this president. And, by the way, something that hasn't been talked about as much tonight, take on his enablers in Congress. When David Duke ran for Congress, whoever ran for governor, the Republican Party 20 years ago ran away from him. Today, they are supporting naked racism in the White House, or at best silent about it. And if you are watching this at home, and you are a Republican member of Congress, consider the fact that when the sun sets on your career and they are writing your story of all the good and bad things you did in your life, the thing you will be remembered for is whether in this moment with this president you found the courage to stand up to him or you continue to put party over country.
Thank you, Mayor. Senator Sanders, as a senior statesman of the group, please respond to Mayor Buttigieg.
Well, Pete is right. It's a question of vision. That's what it is, whether you're young, whether you're old, whether you're in between. And my vision, among other things, says that if we're going to fight for health care, we don't take money from the drug companies or the insurance companies. And I've asked all of the candidates who are running to say they will not accept money from those entities who, in my view, are going to war against the American people in terms of health care. That's a new vision. A new vision says that we must cancel completely student debt because the younger generation in this country today, for the first time in modern American history, will have a lower standard of living than their parents.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. The debate continues right after this. Please. Thank you. The debate continues right after this real quick.
Call it fate. Call it luck.
Well, that was an interesting exchange there. A lot of, what were they talking about just now? They were talking about, staying or going into Afghanistan, or different, random wars and stuff. Would they pull out and stuff, or would they still use nukes? Yeah, I mean, it's honestly surprising that there's Democrats out there who are actually advocating on behalf of us keeping nukes. But then, I think it was Steve Bullock who said that. But he's like, oh, but in my administration, we wouldn't come close to using them. But then why would you keep them? So like, oh, we're not going to get anywhere close to that position, but let's keep them just in case. Like, so like you're just pro-war. That's really what you are. You're not like, don't go out there and claim you give a damn about, keeping the American people safe, which is obviously what a lot of these people say. And then Hickenlooper said something about how like these are just like humanitarian, keeping our troops in these countries are 8 different wars, keeping them there for humanitarian reasons. Are you kidding me? So the I don't know, troops or whatever, people that we have currently in Yemen, for example. I don't know if we have troops there, but we're definitely bombing the shit out of Yemen for, to appease the likes of Saudi Arabia, and we're helping them because Saudi Arabia is also bombing them, and they're just fucking bombing brown people to fucking pieces right now because that's what the defense contractors want so badly. They just want to continue the expanding or at least making worse the wars that we're in right now, and just further killing poor Yemeni people who are just living their lives, and they're just like destroying that country for no fucking reason, probably claiming that there's terrorists there or whatever. But that's bullshit. But they just want to please the defense contractors there, and then But I mean, but it was definitely surprising to see that. Was it Beto O'Rourke, I believe, who said that we should get out of the wars that we're involved in, whether Yemen, Syria, Somalia, Pakistan, whatever. I don't know what he just laid out a bunch of the different countries that we're currently involved in, but he mentioned those, and that was very surprising to see him do that. He's obviously a very kind of faux aggressive, moderate type, and he's saying that. But yeah, I mean that's like one of the only things that, if not the only thing that Beto O'Rourke said that was decent in the debate tonight, because obviously a lot of his other positions are just like absurd and fucking basically right wing. I mean, you can basically say right wing Democrat essentially, centrist or whatever. But yeah, I mean, but that's the thing though. I don't even think he would even live up to. He wouldn't stick to that promise. That's just something that like a lot of these politicians and candidates say, so they can just kind of like get on the side of progressives, but because they know that is the main voting bloc of people in the party. But then in reality, they're not actually going to do what they claim they're going to do or promise they're going to do, because a lot of it comes down to, once I get into the White House, then I'm going to listen to all my advisors, and I'm going to listen to all my strategists, and I'm going to listen to all the people that are going to, give me their wonderful advice, when in reality it's just a bunch of, giving you, like, pointers on how to, like, make the country worse, and not actually do the things that the American people want, but what, lobbyists and strategists in the party want. All right, we're back here.
You will each receive 1 minute. Governor Bullock, we're going to begin with you.
Looks like this is the
I was raised in a single-parent household, at times paycheck to paycheck. Only knew there was a governor's house in town because I delivered newspapers to it, so I made it about 4 blocks in life. Worked my way through college, paid my way through law school. But I had a chance to actually go from delivering newspapers to the governor's house as a kid, now raising our 3 kids. We got to recognize for far too many people in America that shot no longer exists. And for far too many in this country, it never has. I'm running for president to beat Donald Trump, win back the places we lost, and make sure that Americans know that where Washington has left them behind in their economy, their political system, I'll be there. This isn't a choice just between center and left. Or we don't have to choose between what we don't want and what we can't afford. Folks want a different way. They want to believe the economy and our democracy can work for us. That's why I'm running for president.
Thank you. Ms. Williamson?
Yes, our problem is not just that we need to defeat Donald Trump. We need a plan to solve institutionalized hatred, collectivized hatred, and white nationalism. And in order to do that, we need more than political insider game and wonkiness and intellectual argument. Those things will not defeat Donald Trump. We need some radical truth-telling, not just to talk about health care, but talk about why are we so sick all the time. We need to have a serious conversation about race and what is truly owed. Even on the subject of foreign policy, it's all about symptoms and not about cause. We need to talk about the fact that the United States has sacrificed our moral leadership, the fact that countries see us, not only domestically but internationally, with policies that simply support our corporate overlords. The fact that our national defense agenda is driven more by short-term profits for defense contractors than by genuine peace building. There's some corruption that is so deep, ladies and gentlemen. And until the Democratic Party is ready to speak to the deeper corruption, knowing that we ourselves sometimes, because of our own corporate donations, have participated, then I'm afraid those who vote for Trump will continue to vote for Trump, and those who might not like Donald Trump will continue to stay home. I want a politics that goes much deeper. I want a politics that speaks to the heart. Because the only way to fight, you keep talking about how we're going to fight Donald Trump. You can't fight dog whistles. You have to override them. And the only way you can override them is with new voices. Voices of energy that only come from the fact that America has been willing to live up to our own mistakes, atone for our own mistakes, make amends for our own mistakes, love each other, love our democracy, love future generations, something emotional and psychological that will not be emerging from anything on this stage. It will emerge from something I'm the one who's qualified to bring forth.
Congressman Delaney.
Thank you, Jake. John F. Kennedy famously said, we should not seek the Republican answer, we should not seek the Democratic answer, we should seek the right answer. He was right when he said it, and he's right today as well. Donald Trump is the symptom of a disease, and the disease is divisiveness. And I'm the only one on the stage talking about curing that disease, with big ideas like national service, by focusing on actually solving
National
problems.
service.
If we work together, we can fix healthcare and build infrastructure. We can invest in not just technology, but people and entrepreneurs, whether they be in Storm Lake, Iowa, or Detroit, Michigan, or Baltimore, Maryland. We can fight climate change and reimagine our education system. But we have to do it with real solutions, not impossible promises. Isn't it time we had a president who was a leader in both the private sector and in government to lead us into the future? I promise, as president,
that's what Trump is. What do we need another Trump?
Unity and leadership and decency to this country. And that's why I'm running for president. Thank you.
Congressman Ryan.
So in a few minutes, all of the pundits are going to be looking at this debate and saying, well, who captured the left lane, and who captured the center lane, and who captured the moderate lane? I hope tonight, at some level, I captured your imagination. Your imagination about what this country could be like if we united, if we put together real policies that weren't left or right, but new and better. That's how we win the future. It's new and better. A new and better economy, a new and better education system, a new and better healthcare system that focuses on prevention, an education system that focuses on the trauma of our kids. There's not going to be a savior. Not going to be a superstar. It's going to fix all this. It's going to be you and me. It's going to be us. That's how we fix this country. You and I coming together to do big things, to imagine the new country that we want by coming together. Not left or right. New and better.
Governor Hickenlooper.
Thank you. And what a night. I've loved it. I'd like to ask
you did horrible, that's why.
To imagine that you are facing life-threatening surgery tomorrow. Would you choose a doctor who had a track record of proven success, who'd actually done the work, or someone who had just talked about it? That's the question we're facing in this primary. I've actually got a track record as a small business owner, as a mayor, and as a governor. We expanded healthcare in Colorado, got near universal coverage. We fought climate change directly. Right? We beat the NRA. And for the last 3 years, we've been the #1 economy in the country. We can ramp all that out. I'm as progressive as anybody up on this stage.
No, you're not.
Also
Get the fuck out of here.
And I've done the things that most of these other people are just talking about. And I know I can get results. And I can lead the people of this country toward a stronger, a healthier, and a more secure future, and defeat Donald Trump and return this country to its glory. Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Well, thank you, Detroit. To win, we have to listen to people. And out there today is Casey Joe's mom. Casey Joe was a champion high school swimmer from a small town. She got sick, went to the emergency room, and got hooked on opioids. The last thing that she said to her mom was, "Mama, it's not my fault." And she died. A lot of Americans say the same thing every day. And that is what I will stand up for. And what I will stand up against are companies like those pharma companies that got her hooked on those opioids and didn't tell the doctors or the patients what was going to happen. We need someone that has people's back. We also need someone that can win. And I have won in these red districts. I win in the Midwest. I can win in states like Wisconsin and Michigan and Iowa. I also will do my job without fear or favor, just like I did as a prosecutor, and get through the gridlock like I've done as a senator, where I've passed over 100 bills where I've been the lead Democrat. And last, yes, I will govern with integrity. We have the president where people turn off their TV when they see him. Not me. I will make you proud as your president.
Congressman O'Rourke.
We are as divided and polarized as a country as we have ever been. And right now we have a president who uses fear to try to drive us further apart. To meet this challenge, we have to have hope in one another and a faith in a future of this country that includes everyone. My whole life, I've been including people in the success of this country. Starting a small business with high-value, high-wage, high-skilled jobs in the third poorest urban county in America, serving on the city council and holding town hall meetings every single week to remind myself who it is that I serve at the end of the day. And in Congress, being in the minority, but working with Democrats and Republicans alike to deliver for my constituents and this country. And then in Texas this last year, traveling to every county, not writing anybody off, not taking anyone for granted, and at the end of the day, winning more votes than any Democrat had in the history of the state, winning independence for the first time in decades, and winning nearly 500,000 Republicans. And those 38 electoral college votes in Texas are now in play, and I can win them. That is how we defeat Donald Trump in November of 2020, and how we bring this divided.
What's he talking about? Didn't he? He lost his fucking Senate.
2021.
What are you talking about?
Thank you.
Mayor Buttigieg.
There's good news and bad news. I'm going to start with the bad news. Our country's in trouble. GDP is going up and life expectancy is going down. Think about what that means. And it's only getting tougher. By 2030, we will have passed the point of no return on climate. There are going to be 130 million more guns on our streets. I'll be in my 40s then. If you have kids, think about how old they will be then. But here's the good news. It's not too late. We can tell our kids that before we ran out of time, just before we ran out of time, in 2020, we did what it took to deliver a climate that we didn't have to wonder if it could support us. To deliver a society where race has no bearing on your health or your wealth or your relationship with law enforcement. That we did what it took to deliver an economy where a rising tide actually does lift all boats. We can do this if and only if we are ready to walk away from what hasn't worked with bold action and win, not only defeat this president, but defeat his congressional allies with a defeat so big that it reunites the Republican Party with its conscience, as well as bringing Democrats to office. Join me and let's make it happen.
Senator Warren.
From the time I was 7 years old, I had a dream. I wanted to be a public school teacher. But my dad ended up as a janitor, and by the time I graduated from high school, my family didn't have the money to send me off to college. My big chance was what was then a commuter college that cost $50 a semester. For me, what this election is all about is opportunity. Every budget, every policy that we talk about is about who's going to get opportunity. Is it going to go to the billionaires or is it going to go to our kids? Right now, for decades, We have had a government that has been on the side of the rich and the powerful. It has been on the side of the wealthy. And that means it has not been on the side of everyone else, not on the side of people living on our Native American reservations, people living in inner cities, people living in small farms and small communities across this country. How do we beat it? We beat it by being the party of big structural change. Give people a reason to show up and vote. And we beat it by building a grassroots movement across this country. Not showing up behind closed doors with millionaires, but actually building it person by person across this country with small dollar donations, with volunteers, with people who show up and say, I have stake in this democracy. I will not only beat Donald Trump in 2020, I'll start to make real change come 2021.
Senator Sanders.
As somebody who grew up in a family that lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York, and lived paycheck to paycheck, I'm running for president not just to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of this country, a guy who's a racist and a sexist and a homophobe. I'm running to transform this country and to stand with the working class of America, which for the last 45 years has been decimated. 2 days ago, I had a remarkable experience which should tell you everything you need to know about what's going on in America. I took 15 people with diabetes from Detroit a few miles into Canada, and we bought insulin for 1/10 the price being charged by the crooks who run the pharmaceutical industry in America today. But it's not just the price fixing and the corruption and the greed of the pharmaceutical industry. It's what's going on in the fossil fuel industry. It's what's going on in Wall Street. It's what's going on with the prison industrial complex. We need a mass political movement. Please go to BernieSanders.com, become one of our million volunteers. Stand up and take on the greed and corruption of the ruling class of this country. Let's create a government and an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%.
Candidates, thank you so much. That completes tonight's
Very good job.
debate. Join us tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for round 2. 10 more Democratic
Already killed that
candidates for
one.
president. Right back here in Detroit. Now stay tuned for special coverage of tonight's debate with Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo. That begins right now.
So that is the end of the debate tonight. That was very interesting. A lot of insane comments and a lot of stupid back and forth allowed by CNN while cutting off the likes of Bernie Sanders and even in a lot of cases Elizabeth Warren a lot. They gave way too much time to John Hickenlooper and John Delaney and to some extent Steve Bullock too, Klobuchar for sure, Tim Ryan. Oh my God! You know, it's amazing. It's amazing how much they want to kind of portray themselves as like CNN. Compared to what MSNBC does, CNN likes to portray themselves as like we're the fair, neutral arbiters here, and we're totally trying to give everybody a chance to, state their piece and make sure that everybody hears them. But in reality, they end up just letting a bunch of people, honestly, nobody cares about, who are polling at, single-digit percentages, low single-digit percent, not even like 9%, at their best, but giving the people that are polling at 1 or 2 or 3%, giving them so much time to talk when we don't give a damn what these people have to say because nobody cares about what they have to say. A lot of them are just, fucking pissing in the wind, basically, and saying a bunch of platitudes and cliches that nobody cares about. And, at the end of the day, it's, a lot of it it's trying to pander to the centrist, corporatist, type, I guess, voters, or even in many cases the donors too, who, won't be happy with what, these mainstream media networks do. And, you ended up giving, okay, great. I guess unfortunately for one night, probably the same thing is going to happen tomorrow night too, which, I mean, obviously, in my opinion, it's going to be a lot shittier of a debate because, well, in my opinion, at least because, the candidates that I would prefer are not up there. Although Tulsi Gabbard is up there, but she's going to be alone. She's going to be alone among a bunch of centrists. Jay Inslee isn't bad too. Also, Bill de Blasio did pretty well in the last debate. But honestly, the only one that I'm wanting to hear from tomorrow night is going to be Tulsi Gabbard, and I hope she goes after Kamala Harris. But we'll see. I'll obviously have my pre-debate views on that tomorrow night before the debate happens. But yeah, so as far as the winners, I'm gonna definitely put Bernie and Elizabeth Warren there. I think they both did really well. Bernie did really well in making himself look strong. He put out his arguments. He fought back against, the likes of idiot John Delaney and Hickenlooper and Tim Ryan, all these morons that are just making these centrist Democrat, positions, in many cases GOP Republican positions that are just absurd, and pretending to be, I'm totally pro-worker and I'm trying to get the union workers out there to have healthcare, even though I don't want to give anybody healthcare or I want to give people less healthcare essentially, because I want to keep the insurance industries out there so that they can continue price gouging everybody with their bullshit policies. Bullshit insurance policies essentially, and so Bernie had to fight against that, but he still did really well. He was able to kind of swat them away like flies, essentially very easily. I think he was obviously able to put out his message out there really well. His closing statement was excellent. Elizabeth Warren was also a winner because she was doing a lot of the similar things that Bernie was doing, but she was putting out a lot more cliches and platitudes than him, which is not surprising. But she still did well in conveying her message, and kind of, which is fitting because she was standing right next to him, but she was basically connecting herself at the hip with Bernie, while those two basically fought off again the likes of Delaney and Hickenlooper and even to some extent, in a lot of extent, Steve Bullock, who was also arguing with Bernie and Warren a lot. She was mocking. Who was she? She was mocking, I think, John Delaney for something as far as him being a sellout to the insurance industry. I think Bernie even did that too, saying that he profits off of them and shit. So. Yeah, a lot of the things that Warren did was very similar to what Bernie did as far as his success and her success. I also thought, as I was stating a lot on Twitter, I also thought that Marianne Williamson did very well. She put out a lot of kind of cliche type stuff too, but she definitely sprinkled in some policy there, which I think it was based on my expectations that I didn't think she would do well. She did well. So because my expectations were low, she ended up just kind of exceeding my expectations. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that she put out really substantive shit and said everything that was wonderful, unlike the likes of Bernie and to some extent Warren did. But she definitely sounded a hell of a lot more inspiring than a lot of the other candidates did. She was shooting from the hip a lot. She was saying things, especially regarding, when it came to, I think in many cases, when it came to healthcare policy and reparations and stuff like that, she was definitely saying things that you weren't hearing from a lot of the other candidates. And I definitely, applaud her for standing, keeping herself, out there as far as, making herself stand out and getting people probably to notice her more than people expected. And she did well. I think that's going to bump her up a little bit in the polls, but I don't think it's going to give her that much attention. I think that similarly, in the same way that Tulsi Gabbard got a lot of attention after the first debate, where she went after Tim Ryan and stuff, and people were searching for her through Google, Marianne Williamson, I think, is going to get the same kind of attention. I think she's getting a lot of that kind of attention on on Twitter as well. So, and I think those were the three winners for sure. I think the people that probably didn't make a lot of inroads and just kind of maintained like they kind of maintained their status, didn't really go anywhere, I think would be, I would say it would be Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, and maybe Steve Bullock. Bullock didn't do as bad as I thought he would because as I thought he would do, because I think he did put out some decent policies statements as far as saying that he's going to fight back against money in politics, and this is something I've been doing for a while, blah blah blah. He was speaking to like the middle of the country voters, and this is going to appeal to those people a lot, and he sounded decent in that regard. I don't think he obviously didn't, say anything that was overly, like amazing or anything. It was just kind of like, just something that the middle of the road voters would prefer. And when it comes to who else did I mention? I mentioned Pete Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke. So Beto O'Rourke and Buttigieg also, I don't think they're going to get very high in the polls after this debate. So I don't think they're going to experience much of a jump, because they didn't really stand out all that much. They were kind of like, they were saying some okay things that people would notice, but I don't think they got very big high pops from the crowd. Bernie definitely did. Warren definitely did comparatively, and I don't think Buttigieg and O'Rourke did that. I think they'll get maybe a little bit of a bump, like I said, and I don't think Bullock will, but I think Buttigieg and O'Rourke will, because they do have a little bit more of a favorable stance among the Democratic kind of voters and kind of Democratic loyalists. So Buttigieg and O'Rourke will definitely get a little bit of a bump, just because they are a little bit more well known, whereas Bullock will just be like whatever, because he didn't really stand out and nobody really knows who the fuck he is. So they're just like, oh, okay, well, we noticed that guy, but I don't know, I don't remember him saying anything all that significant, And yeah, so I don't really see him getting anywhere. Excuse me. And but we'll see what happens with Buttigieg and O'Rourke. My prediction is they will get a little up there, and they're going to kind of maintain their status in the ranking of the polls. So it won't do enough for them to get them, kind of shoot them up there. And that's what I expect. As for the losers, I think the losers of the debate were undoubtedly Tim Ryan, Amy Klobuchar, John Hickenlooper, and John Delaney. So I want to get into a little bit of detail on this. So when it came to John Delaney, he was by far the biggest loser on that debate stage. That guy made such a fool of himself. He said so many ridiculous things. I almost have trouble even keeping up with it. I almost kind of blanked out, and I was just like getting annoyed by listening to it. But obviously, doing this podcast, I'm forced to listen to it, and that's fine, whatever. But yeah, I basically just kind of just like blanked out, and I was just like not even hearing what he was saying because it was so ridiculous. But the only reason I was able to kind of maintain some I guess interest in hearing it is because I wanted to hear how Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, who he was going at it with the most, would respond. So the best parts of John Delaney was him just saying a lot of stupid shit and then getting responded to by Warren and Sanders, and they fought back against his bullshit very, very well. I think I hope and I think he will be dropping out before the next debate because he did so terribly, and obviously there's certain limits as far as donors and stuff and rankings in the polls that you have to reach to be able to stay in the debates. So I suspect he's going to drop out. People are already putting out the hashtag of drop out Delaney, so he's not going to look good. There's no, in my opinion, there's no conceivable way that Delaney is going to be like anybody's going to go out there and wanting to keep him out there. The only remote defense I saw of John Delaney was when neocon fucking anti-Bernie idiot Jennifer Rubin, who writes for the Washington Post, came out and said that something along the lines of John Delaney is hitting Bernie over the head with drums or drumming him up or something, some stupid shit, and her being like anti-Bernie is not. I mean, it's definitely not surprising for her to be saying that, so that's, just her being stupid, and that was the only praise I saw of Delaney. And I'm sure there was a couple of other establishment types that were saying that, but as far as the ones that I saw, that was the only one that I saw, praising him. When it comes to Hickenlooper, he was just sounding like an idiot and just like saying a lot of cliches and platitudes that didn't make a lot of sense compared to Delaney, who was just completely against any policies that that Bernie and Warren were pushing. Hickenlooper was a little bit on that same wavelength, but he was just trying to sound like fake. He was trying to sound like more fake inspiring, trying to sound like this inspirational speaker and putting out these great ideas when in reality it was just a bunch of platitudes. And he made a fool of himself. He constantly landed flat on his fucking face. Wasn't making any sense. He wasn't, saying anything that was even remotely interesting. And it's just like, Bernie, I think, went after him a couple times. I think Warren as well. He was just, he was doing the same kind of thing with, as I said, with Delaney, just shitting on Bernie and Warren, but he wasn't doing it with any kind of substance. At least you can give Delaney credit for being like, hey, I'm defending my horrible positions, and I'm saying these horrible things, but at least I'm backing it up with these stupid things that I believe in. Whereas Hickenlooper was just like, oh yeah, well these are not things that we should be doing, and we should be investing in our country and blah blah blah, just a bunch of platitudes, and that's not going to get you anywhere. When it came to Tim Ryan, I think the worst part of his debate. Now, while I don't believe that Tim Ryan did as bad as Delaney Hickenlooper, because he did put out some decent things regarding helping workers and unions and stuff, but when he got fucking smacked down by Bernie when he says, I wrote the damn bill, when he was referring to one of the Medicare for All bills, I believe it was, or he claimed that he supported, I think it was him that claimed he supported a Medicare expansion or Medicare buy-in bill or something. I think that was Tim Ryan that said that. I could be wrong on that one. But either way, Bernie went after him, responded to him. He says, I wrote the damn bill. And he yelled at him and said that. And by the way, a lot of people have this issue with Bernie yelling. I don't get why that's the case. I guess they're just, I think they think it reminds them of Trump. So it's God forbid anybody sounds angry that's a politician. You shouldn't be sounding angry even though millions and millions of people in this country are going through fucking terrible shit, and we shouldn't be angry about that. So we should be whispering and sounding really professorial, apparently. Anyway, so, but yeah, Tim Ryan definitely got smacked down by Bernie. He was pushing for a lot of kind of cliche platitude policies, nothing really all that great. I think it was more of him just kind of sounding appealing to that more Midwestern kind of appeal, because he's in Ohio and stuff, and kind of Trump country type areas, and he knows he has to appeal to that crowd by saying those kind of things, and ultimately it just doesn't sound really good to a Democratic Party audience, people that are in the vote for Democrats and kind of loyals to the party and kind of those policies. So I don't really see him getting anywhere. And if anything, he's going to go lower, and I would be surprised if he ended up in the next debate, for sure. And finally, Amy Klobuchar, I think she was definitely the worst. Her and Delaney, I would say, were the two worst out of all the people on that stage. Her and Delaney were just atrocious. I mean, I don't know. I want to say it's Hickenlooper and Delaney, but Klobuchar, every time I see her talk, she just sounds so stupid. She sounds like she's totally out of ideas, and she's just saying anything that's just going to stick to a wall. Just throwing Jell-O against a wall and just hoping it's going to stick. And ultimately, the things that she says they just don't appeal to anybody. Nothing makes sense. It's just you're just spewing a bunch of platitudes and cliches, and on top of it, your ideas that have any kind of meat on them are just terrible, and it just doesn't sound. It doesn't sound interesting, or it doesn't sound, like anything that anybody would be interested in. I think the only reason the people, because I have seen people, and I pointed out on Twitter how Kathy Griffin loves her so much. So these celebrity types that like them, that probably donate to them. The only reason they like them is because she's a woman, she's white, she's from Minnesota, and, no offense against Minnesota, but I mean, and because Ilhan Omar is from Minnesota, so we do actually have a progressive there. Keith Ellison is also from Minnesota, so there are some decent people that are from Minnesota. But when it comes to somebody like that who kind of, is a senator, so they represent the whole state, they're going to try to appeal with much more moderate centrist policies, and that's what Klobuchar does. And everything she puts out there just doesn't sound all that interesting. Now, maybe to some Democrats, like I said, celebrity types that are donating to these people and shit, maybe they're going to find what they say interesting, but it's really ultimately not anything that's going to get people jumping out of their seats and being like, oh my God, you're saying something so wonderful and inspiring. No. And on top of it, your policies suck too. So what difference does it make? You sound totally like out of touch, and like nobody is truly going to want to hear what you have to say because you're not saying anything that is going to appeal to regular people, even though you're in the middle of the country and you think you're appealing to middle of the country people. And that's really her only thing. That's really the only thing that people like her and Tim Ryan have, is saying like, well, I'm from the middle of the country, so I appeal to people in the middle of the country. It's just like the same people that say, oh, I'm Hispanic or I'm black, and then that means that people that are Hispanic or black are going to vote for me, or people of color are going to vote for me. So that's the same thing appeal that they have. They say they're from the middle of the country. Oh, I'm totally going to help people that are struggling in in the Rust Belt and Trump country and all those whatever Minnesota, whatever it is, those kind of states. When in reality, they're not going to. You're still going to be stuck at 1%. You're still going to be stuck at 2%. If not, you're going to drop out, as soon as possible in the, before the next debate. That's my prediction. So, and that's what's going to ultimately happen. And I think the winners were very clear tonight. I think the people that kind of didn't make much of an impression was a little bit. I mean, we'll see what happens with that, but I think the people that I predicted that were more in the middle of the road, like didn't really make that much of an impression, like Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke, and who was the other one? The other one was, I think, Steve Bullock. Like they're going to be like, like nobody's really going to like get blown away by them, but they're also not going to be totally like inspired by or totally want to like hate them either. So I'm actually surprised Steve Bullock even got to get on the stage because he wasn't in the last debate at all. And then the losers, I mean, those were obvious to me. Those four losers, Klobuchar, Ryan, Hickenlooper, and Delaney were just terrible. They were utterly atrocious, and they did nothing to make themselves look good other than just sticking their foot in the mouth constantly. So that's going to be it for us for today's episode. That was a very long debate. I didn't know it was going to end up being so long. It actually ended up being like 2.5 hours, if I remember correctly. I think it ended up like 7:45. It was like at least 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 40 minutes, something like that. So that was a long one. We're obviously going to be back tomorrow night too for the second debate that's going to happen. That's going to have, again, just to remind you guys, that one's going to have Kamala Harris in it. Hold on, let me just check out who else is going to be in that debate real quick here, because that's important. Just so you guys know. Yeah, here it is. So it's going to be Michael Bennet, Kirsten Gillibrand, Julian Castro, Cory Booker, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Jay Inslee, and Bill de Blasio. So we'll see you guys tomorrow night. Before I get going, I just want to let you guys know, just check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/ProgBlacksmith. If you can become a patron and give me a generous contribution, it would be greatly appreciated. Also, remember, if you want more information about this podcast, check out the Prog Square on Twitter, the hashtag the Prog Square on Twitter. That will direct you to all of my broadcasts on Periscope, as well as every segment I post on YouTube. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow night. Take care.